In spring 2018, I moved into a new apartment in Seattle. The building was old, 4 stories, and I rented a 1-bedroom on the 2nd floor. I was 28, a back-end developer with a steady job and boring habits. The first week was boxes, new keys, and learning which pipes groaned at night. About a week in, I met my upstairs neighbor in the basement laundry room. Her name was Diana, maybe 30, a nurse who worked nights. We ran into each other a couple more times down there. She was friendly and told me where to find decent coffee and late food. One afternoon she asked if I wanted to come up for coffee sometime. I said sure, figuring she was just being neighborly. That Saturday I went upstairs. Her apartment was very clean, almost like a hotel. Counters were bare, and there was a faint lemon smell. We sat at her small table and drank coffee. She asked a lot of questions about my work and schedule. Where I worked, what time I left, did I code at home, that kind of thing. Then it was hobbies, where I was from, and whether I was seeing anyone. I answered because nothing was a secret, but it started to feel like a form. When I left, I told myself I was just being weird about it. When I was leaving, she asked to exchange numbers in case either of us needed anything. I gave her mine. For a few days, we texted normal neighbor things. Then she started sending more. Photos of food she cooked, memes, little check-ins about my day. I replied politely, but kept it short. 3 weeks after we met, she suggested going to a movie. I said I was busy with work, and maybe another time. She said no problem, and the messages got even more frequent. 5 or 6 a day, sometimes more, usually nothing important. She would mention when my lights were on or off like it was small talk. One evening while I was working from home, I heard a slow creak overhead. Then silence. Then the creak again, a few feet forward, like someone stepping carefully. Our floors were wood, so normal noise traveled, but this felt different. I walked from my desk to the kitchen and waited. A few seconds later, I heard the same slow step above the kitchen. I went to the bathroom and heard it above the bathroom. I tested it a couple times that night, moving in short bursts to check. Each time the steps followed, slow and deliberate. After that, it happened every evening. If I sat still, there was nothing. If I shifted a little, I heard the faint response above me. I kept my replies to her texts even shorter. Sometimes she texted right after the creaking stopped, asking what I was making or watching. One morning I found a note slipped under my door. It said, in neat handwriting, "I know you feel this connection between us too." It also said it was not a coincidence we ended up in this building. I decided to talk to her directly so nothing would get twisted. I went upstairs and knocked. She opened with a big smile like we shared a joke. I told her I appreciated the friendliness, but I wanted more distance with neighbors. I kept it simple and clear. Her face changed fast. The smile dropped and her eyes went flat. "You do not understand what you are missing," she said, and then she closed the door. That night the creaking did not stop until 4 in the morning. I know because I watched the clock and tried not to move. Every time I shifted in my chair, something shifted above me. At 2, I put in headphones to drown it out. It did not help much. At 6, I messaged my boss and took the morning off. Next day, I went to the manager. I gave him the note, explained the rest. He read it twice and said Diana had already complained that I was stalking her, knocking on her door at night, and sending inappropriate messages. He slid a copy of her complaint across the desk, dated yesterday. My name and unit were listed with a clean set of claims: late-night knocking, leering in the stairwell, persistent messages. I felt my face go hot. I unlocked my phone, opened our thread, and handed it to him. Every message was hers. Mine were short and neutral. "Thanks. Sounds good. Have a good shift." I scrolled through the week so he could see gaps and timestamps. He read quietly, then nodded and took photos for the file. "I'll look into it," he said. "Don't contact her. If she reaches out, keep it documented." "I haven't contacted her except to set a boundary," I said. "And this." I slid the note across his desk, found it under my door. He compared the handwriting to her rental documents and sighed. He didn't promise anything, just said he'd speak to other residents and pull the camera footage from the halls. I went back to my place and tried to move less. That night the creaking returned, slower and spaced out, like pacing in short lines. I left the TV on low and waited for morning. A week later, a moving truck showed up. I saw boxes in the hall by her door and kept walking. The older neighbor from the third floor, the guy who feeds the alley cats, caught me by the stairs and said she was leaving. He'd overheard the manager asking for her keys and going over the checkout list. I didn't celebrate. I just stayed out of sight and kept to my floor. That evening I ran into the manager by the mailboxes. He looked tired. "We asked her to move," he said. "After reviewing your texts and talking to the neighbors above and below, it matched some previous concerns." "Previous where?" I asked. "Her last building," he said. "Different neighborhood." I called their manager. There were reports. She filed harassment complaints against a male neighbor who, from their records, hadn't done anything. It escalated to welfare checks and a restraining order request that was denied. It burned a lot of time. He didn't share private details, just the pattern: heavy attention, then a flip when she felt rejected. He said the tenant below me had heard the late-night pacing. The cameras showed me coming and going at normal hours, no midnight visits to her door. He told me she'd argued when confronted and then agreed to move rather than take a formal violation. I asked if there was anything else I needed to do. "Keep everything," he said. "If she contacts you from a new number, send it to me." Later, the older neighbor said something that stuck. People believe the first story they hear. He wasn't blaming me. He said to document everything, always. He'd heard from a friend near her old place that the guy she accused there lost his relationship over it. I don't know if that was true, but it was enough to make me lock my door and leave my phone on the table. When the truck pulled away, the building went back to normal. Just doors, mail, quiet hallways. But I still found myself listening for the soft roll of a step over my head and feeling my shoulders tense before I remembered she was gone. I still flinch when a floorboard pops in my apartment. I had the locks changed even though she was gone, not because I thought she had a key, but because sleep was easier after. For months I checked the lobby before going in or out, standing by the glass until I was sure she wasn't there. What scares me most is how ready her lie was, how she had a complaint on file before I even talked to the manager, how fast it could have flipped if I didn't have that boring message thread to show. The manager said she moved to a different part of the city and didn't know where. I think about that sometimes when a new tenant moves into any unit above me, and I hear a chair drag or a step that pauses in the wrong place. I wonder if she found a new building, a new neighbor to focus on. I wonder if that person knows to document everything, to save every message, to keep conversations in hallways, and to never open the door when she knocks. I knew we were in serious trouble when the man turned toward us, and his eyes didn't focus on anything at all. That happened on a hot August evening in 2019 when I was 15. Me and two friends, Jacob and his younger sister Marisa, were skateboarding near the old railroad bridge on the outskirts of town. We hung out there most nights after sunset, because the pavement was smooth, the lights didn't work, and nobody bothered us. Around 9 p.m. that evening, we spotted a men's jacket folded neat on the concrete barrier at the bridge entrance. Jacob joked that someone jumped into the river, Marisa said it looked expensive and probably just forgotten. We kept skating and said we'd leave it there in case the owner came back. About 20 minutes later, I kicked something with my front wheels, one men's boot. The second boot was lying way off like it had been tossed. It didn't match the jacket being folded. It was starting to feel wrong. We did one more run along the flats. I tried to shake the feeling, but I kept glancing at the jacket and then at the boots, telling myself there were normal reasons. Someone changed into running shoes. Someone sobered up and walked home barefoot. Little things kept bugging me though, like how the boots weren't side by side, and how the jacket sleeves were tucked in like whoever folded it took their time. Jacob caught me looking and said, "We'll bounce in a minute." Marisa said she wanted one more try on the curb, and then we'd grab slushies. I agreed, but my stomach was tight for no good reason, like when a teacher calls on you and you haven't done the reading. We were about to leave when we heard this weird scratching sound coming from under the bridge. At first I thought it was branches, but it was too steady. Jacob wanted to check it out because he was always braver than us, and honestly, he didn't like leaving questions unanswered. We walked down the slope using our phone flashlights, staying together. In the far corner, under the bridge where the concrete met the dirt, we saw a man. He was sitting with his back to us, rocking side to side, scratching the wall with his fingernails. That was the sound. He wore only a white tank top and jeans, barefoot, hair all messed up. Jacob called out, "Hey, you okay?" Not loud, just normal. The man slowly turned around and I saw his face, unshaven with glassy eyes that looked through us like we weren't there. His pupils didn't land on anything. He started laughing, this high, thin laugh that didn't fit his body. Then he stopped like a switch flipped, dropped down, and started crawling toward us on all fours, fast, making these wheezing sounds. It wasn't like a prank. His hands slipped on the concrete and he didn't even register the pain. I said, "Back up." Marisa said, "Nope," and stepped behind me. Jacob told the guy, "We'll get help," but he kept coming. Marisa screamed and we ran back up. Jacob grabbed his sister's hand. I snatched up our boards and we bolted toward the 24-hour convenience store 3 blocks away. I remember hearing the scraping behind us for a second and then nothing. Maybe he stopped, maybe he fell, I don't know. We didn't look back because there was no point. My hands were shaking when I called my dad from the store. He answered on the second ring, and I tried to keep my voice steady so he'd actually listen and not think I was overreacting. I told him about the jacket, the boots, the man, the crawling. Dad showed up in 10 minutes with a cop who turned out to be his childhood friend. The cop was calm in that way that makes you feel stupid and relieved at the same time. We explained what happened and showed them the location on my phone map. The cop asked a few simple questions. Distance, which corner, how he moved. Then he called for backup and an ambulance. He told us to wait in Dad's car. Jacob didn't argue. Marisa sat in the middle, still crying a little but trying to breathe normal. I kept replaying the guy's eyes, how they didn't land on us, as if he was listening to something else in his head. About half an hour later, the cop came back. He said they found the man. He was alive, but in a state of severe drug intoxication, probably methamphetamine or something synthetic. He'd been aggressive when they approached and they had to restrain him, but he had no serious physical injuries. The jacket and boots were his. The ambulance took him to the hospital for medical clearance and evaluation. The cop thanked us for calling and said we did the right thing not trying to help on our own because someone in that state is unpredictable and dangerous. Dad was silent the whole drive home and only said before we got out that I wasn't going back there in the evenings. I didn't argue. He looked tired in that way he gets after a double shift, like he wanted this to be done and not turn into a bigger thing. In the kitchen he told Mom everything, but asked her not to blow it up. She started to, you could see it coming, but she stayed measured after he asked. She hugged me and said, Okay. We'll keep it simple. You're safe. I nodded and went to my room and kept the light on, even though I knew that made me look like a kid. For the next couple weeks, I had nightmares about that laugh and how the man crawled toward us. It wasn't every night, but enough that I started dreading sleep. I'd wake up with the sound of nails on concrete stuck in my head. It got to where I avoided underpasses during the day, which sounds dumb, but I just did. Jacob admitted he wasn't sleeping well either. He texted me at 2 a.m. one night. "You hear it sometimes? That squeal?" I sent back, "Yeah," and neither of us said more. We didn't want to give it new life by talking about it too much. Marisa told her parents, and they banned her from evening walks for a month. She said it wasn't a punishment. They were scared and didn't want to gamble. She didn't fight them on it. She stopped taking the shortcut behind the grocery store too. When we saw each other at school, we didn't make the bridge the center of conversation, but it kept creeping in. She would say, "I can't get over the jacket being folded," and I'd say, "Or the boots being apart," and then we'd stop. Later I learned from Dad that they identified the man. He was local and had drug problems for several years. His family tried to get him treatment, but he kept relapsing. Dad said the family sounded worn out, not uncaring, just exhausted. After that incident, they sent him to mandatory rehab. I don't know if it helped. Dad didn't either. He said those programs can work, but only if the person really wants it and has support. I remember feeling two things at once: relief that he wasn't dead under there, and this heavy, dull guilt, like maybe we were talking about him like a story when he was still a person trying to get by and failing at it. We never skated at that bridge again, not even during the day. No one said we couldn't in daylight, but none of us suggested it. We switched to the school parking lot and then to a park where there were always people around. It wasn't as smooth, it wasn't as fun, but we knew the trade. Once, a month after, Jacob said, "We could hit the old spot quick before sunset," and then he trailed off and shook his head. I said, "Park's fine," and that was that. We didn't make a pact or anything. We just moved on because moving on seemed smarter than pretending it hadn't happened. 6 years passed, and I still flinch when I hear scratching sounds. It's not constant or anything. It just pops up in weird places, like when someone drags a chair in a classroom or a dog scrapes a door. I sometimes think about what would have happened if we tried to help him ourselves without adults. If we went closer. If Jacob reached out a hand like he almost did. Jacob says we got lucky because there were 3 of us, and the guy was too high to catch us, and maybe that's true. But I don't turn it into a joke. I'm grateful we got scared enough to run, and scared enough to call for help. That jacket and those boots still show up in my head like warning signs we almost ignored. Not spooky, just practical. Someone took time to fold a jacket. Someone lost track of their shoes. Marisa is studying to be a social worker now and says she wants to help people with addictions. She told me she hates how it turns a person into a situation and how families burn out until everyone is just trying to stop the next fire. Maybe that evening affected her that way. It definitely affected me, because I don't talk myself out of obvious risk anymore. If something doesn't line up, an item that shouldn't be there, a person acting wrong in a way that says danger instead of help, I pay attention, I keep my distance, and I call the people who know what they're doing. I was 14 and in 8th grade when this happened. I lived in a quiet neighborhood with parks and bike paths where kids could hang out until dark without anyone worrying much. That Sunday in late April, I met my 2 friends, Kate and Ashley, to go rollerblading in the big park near school. We had a favorite route along the waterfront with smooth asphalt where we spent hours practicing little jumps, and just talking about dumb school stuff. We got there around 2 in the afternoon, and the park was busy. It started normal, the way good days do. We took turns trying to do a spin near a bench, and I almost fell and everyone laughed. We talked about a math quiz, about a guy in 9th who'd been suspended for vaping, about how my mom still made me wear wrist guards. Nothing dramatic. We were going to loop the long path again and then grab our bikes from the exit and maybe get slushies. That day, though, Ashley and I got into an argument over something stupid. She said something mean about my new haircut, like, "It looks like you let your brother do it," and I snapped back way too fast. I said she was just mad her parents wouldn't let her dye her hair, which was unnecessary. It escalated from there in that weird, quiet way where you're both smiling but not really. Kate tried to make peace, saying, "Guys, stop. It's not a big deal." But Ashley got mad for real and said she was going home. I was annoyed too and decided to skate a different route until I cooled off. They headed toward the park exit where we'd left the bikes, and I rolled the opposite way. There were tennis courts and a playground in that section. Fewer people. Some parents with small kids. One older couple on a bench. I skated circles for about 20 minutes, practicing small hops over the curb and timing my turns. I kept rewinding the fight in my head and planning one of those apologies that isn't really an apology. On maybe the 4th loop, I noticed a man by a tree looking my way. I didn't think much of it. People watch skaters all the time. I did another loop and he was still there, only now he stood closer to the path. Hands in his pockets, not moving. He looked middle-aged, maybe 40, wearing a tracksuit and a cap like any regular park guy. But the way he stared without blinking made something go tight in my stomach. I decided to head back to the main exit where Kate and Ashley would be. I turned and started skating the other direction. I glanced over my shoulder and saw him step onto the path behind me. He kept a distance of about 30 feet, matching me. My heart sped up and I pushed harder, but the asphalt there was bumpy, and you can't fly on rollerblades over that. I tried to keep steady speed without catching a wheel on a crack. I listened for him and heard nothing, which somehow felt worse. I didn't want to stop and unlace, because then he'd close the gap in seconds. I passed a mom buckling her toddler into a stroller and considered saying something like, "Can I walk with you?" But I pictured her confused face and me sounding dramatic, and I kept going. I veered onto the path that leads toward the lake, thinking it would be busier. I knew that route well enough. Usually there were dog walkers and kids with cheap fishing rods. The path curved through low trees and then straightened along the water. I risked one quick look back but didn't slow down. This stretch was almost empty. I kept moving, not daring to look back yet. I breathed through my teeth and kept my knees soft so the wheels wouldn't catch on a crack. I scanned ahead for people, anyone, to make eye contact with. Someone who'd get it without a whole explanation. The main exit was left, and the parking lot was beyond the trees, but the lake path felt safer for now. I could hear water lapping and a gull somewhere. Ordinary sounds that didn't match my heartbeat. Just a couple of fishermen sat far away by the water, their backs to me, focused on their lines. Looking back, he was almost running, closing the distance. Panic hit, and I stopped to yank the buckles. Sneakers would be faster than skates here. My hands shook and slipped. Then his voice. "Stop, I need to talk to you." I ripped both skates off, grabbed them, and ran barefoot. I sprinted to the fishermen by the lake and yelled that someone was chasing me. They stood up fast. One older, one younger. The younger stepped toward the path and told me, "Stay here." I shoved my feet into my sneakers without tying them and clutched the rollerblades like weights. The younger guy moved a few yards and squared his shoulders like he wanted to be seen. I looked back. The man stood at the trees and had stopped. He didn't come closer. He watched us the way people watch traffic, like he was deciding if it was worth it. "Do you know him?" the younger asked, eyes on path. I said no, and explained between breaths that he followed me from the playground and sped up when I did. My voice shook, stuck on the cap and tracksuit. The older said he'd call police, asked my name, age, parents. While he talked to the dispatcher, the younger called out, "Hey man, she's with us. Park's busy. What do you want?" The man didn't answer. He stepped twice and slipped into the bushes. My stomach dropped. Losing sight felt worse. The older kept me close and asked officers to lake. Police arrived about 10 minutes later. 2 on foot, 2 on bikes. They talked to me first, then the fisherman, then spread out. I gave what I had. Tracksuit navy, cap gray, average height, no beard. I repeated his words. They asked about a car or contact. I said no, nothing. They offered to drive me to the main exit. I agreed and texted Kate. They were there, pacing by bikes. Kate asked if I was hurt. Ashley cried and kept apologizing. I asked if my friends could ride with us home. Officers agreed to follow. My parents arrived. We reported. They gave a case number and a card. We explained the fight and the split. An officer said they'd patrol more, check cameras, and the file was flagged. He asked my parents to call if anything happened. He gave advice. Stay with friends. Call 911. Go to adults. I nodded. Over the weeks, patrols increased. People noticed and afternoons changed. My parents banned me from going alone, and I didn't argue. I stopped meeting friends there without an adult. I changed routes to school. Officers called once about cameras but couldn't match anyone. We never heard more. The park changed. My parents set rules that night. No park alone, no exceptions. If we skated, an adult came. I didn't fight it. We stuck to streets near houses, or went only when my dad could watch. I never skated that park without adults again. It wasn't a threat. It was policy. In the following weeks, we saw uniforms around the park. People pointed them out, then went back to their days. Officers told my parents they hadn't found him, and probably he left fast after the call. They took a few more statements from others. Nothing helpful. Then the weeks passed. I still replay that afternoon. If I hadn't run to those fishermen, I don't know where it ends. People say trust your gut. Fine, do it. A regular-looking man told me to stop, and I didn't. Now I carry a checklist. Look, leave, ask help, and don't apologize for it. During my senior year of high school, I was the quiet new kid who transferred in at the start of the year and barely had any friends. I kept my head down because it was easier. I ate in the library, sat at the end table near the old computer nobody used, and tried to look busy so the librarians didn't ask questions. I wasn't miserable, just stuck. So when Tyler stopped me in the hall and asked if I wanted to go to a party at his older brother's place, I didn't know what face to make. He was the kind of guy who talked to everyone, the smiley, loud type. "It's chill," he said. "People from different schools, music, nothing crazy." He said it like he was doing me a favor, and I heard myself say yes. I told my parents I was sleeping over at a friend's house. Stupid, I know. But at 17, I was more scared of them saying no than anything else. Saturday night, he pulled up in a dented car that smelled like air freshener over something sour. We drove toward the edge of town where the houses sat far apart, and there were empty lots with tall weeds, the kind of area where people leave broken down stuff and never come back for it. The house was a low one-story with peeling paint and a front step that sagged. Tyler said his brother knew the guy who rented it. I counted maybe 10 people inside, mostly guys who looked 19 or 20, and 3 girls who had that easy, laughing way like they'd been around this crowd forever. Music thumped too loud for the weak speakers. It smelled like cigarettes and something sweet that wasn't just soda. Tyler pressed a bright cup into my hand and said, "It's just a cocktail." Promise I didn't want him to think I was weird, so I took a sip. It tasted like melted candy and rubbing alcohol. I stuck near the wall at first, pretending to text. A tall guy tried to pull me into a conversation about a band I'd never heard of. I nodded and laughed when he laughed and kept sipping because it gave me something to do with my hands. About 30 minutes in, my head started buzzing too hard for one cup. I've been tipsy before, never like this. My eyes felt like they were sliding off the room. I sat down on a beaten-up couch in the corner and told myself I just needed a few minutes. The cushions sank like a pit, and I kept blinking to clear the blur. Tyler checked on me and told me to loosen up, then drifted back to the kitchen, joking with the older guys like he'd known them his whole life. I tried to track the clock on the microwave, but the numbers doubled. One of the girls with shiny hair laughed at something near the sink, and I remember thinking I should ask her name just to have a normal person to talk to. I didn't stand up. Tyler came back and dropped onto the couch beside me, too close. His arm went around my shoulders. I thought it was for balance until his hand slid down and rested on my knee. I moved my leg and he followed it, pressure firm like a test. "I'm good," I said. I tried to make it light, like a joke. He just grinned and squeezed a little. Then another guy I didn't know sat on my other side, pressing me deeper into the cushions. He was older maybe, with a hat pulled low. He started touching my arm, like casual at first, fingers smoothing up toward my shoulder and back down, then lower to my waist. The room tilted. I pushed at Tyler's wrist, careful at first, then harder when he didn't move. "I need air," I said, or I think I said it. The words came out wrong, like my mouth wasn't synced up. "You're fine," someone said. It might have been the guy in the hat. Someone else laughed. Tyler told me to relax, that I was being uptight, that I'd have more fun if I stopped overthinking. I tried to stand, and my legs felt like they belonged to someone else. My knees slid, and I sat down again too fast. Hands found me like they'd been waiting, one at my thigh, one at the side of my ribs. The couch swallowed my hips and I couldn't get leverage to push up. I said, "No, I'm serious." And it sounded small, like a kid arguing bedtime. It hit me then, not like a thought, but like a cold snap. They'd put something in my drink. I scanned for my cup, for anything, but the edges of the room were going dark, and the faces were too bright in the middle, stretched and close. The music felt far away, then close, then far again. The guy in the hat said something about how I needed to chill. Tyler kept his arm heavy across me. More hands. A palm flat on my stomach through my shirt. Fingers hooking under the hem like they owned it. I tried to shove them off in pieces. Wrist, elbow, a knuckle. Like if I could peel one away, the rest would stop. "Stop," I said. I remember hearing myself. I remember how quiet it sounded under the bass. Someone shushed me. Someone else said, "She's fine." My head rolled against the back of the couch and I caught one of the girls looking. She was the one from the kitchen with the shiny hair, a plastic cup in her hand, lip gloss too bright. Our eyes met for a second. She took in the scene, me pinned, their hands. And her mouth did this little uncertain line, like she knew exactly what this was and didn't want to be in it. I held her eyes as long as I could. Then she looked away and turned back to her friend, talking like nothing was happening. Panic rose up inside me, and I used the last of my strength to bite Tyler's hand when he tried to cover my mouth. He yelled and jerked away, swore, called me crazy. I used that second to shove at the couch and slip down to the edge. My shoes slid on the sticky floor, but I got upright and went for the door. Someone grabbed the back of my jacket and I twisted so hard the zipper burned my neck. I hit the hallway wall, bounced off, and ran. I heard, "Get her," and a crash behind me, but I was already shoving the front door with my shoulder. It stuck, then gave. The air outside felt cold and thin. I almost fell off the steps. I ran along the road, not fast, more like lurching, using the ditch line as a guide. I kept thinking if a car came and slowed down, that would be worse. So I cut across a patch of gravel and stayed by the mailbox posts. My legs were rubber. I tasted metal. I didn't know which way town was until I saw the glow up ahead and a sign I recognized from rides with my mom, 24-hour gas station. I aimed for it. A guy at a pump watched me come in with my hair stuck to my face. He asked if I was okay, and I said yes too fast. Inside, the cashier's eyes went wide, and he asked if I needed help. I said, "I need to call someone," and he slid his phone across the counter without asking anything else. I called my brother because he wouldn't tell our parents first thing. He picked up on the second ring, said my name like a question. I told him where I was and that I needed a ride. He said, "Stay inside. Do not go back outside," and hung up. I sat in the corner by the rack of beef jerky and watched the door, sure they'd pull up any second. The cashier offered me water, and I took one sip and almost threw up. 20 minutes felt like 5. My brother came in with his hoodie on over pajama pants and took one look at me. He didn't ask much in front of the cashier. He put an arm around me and guided me out. In the car, he kept glancing over. His jaw was tight. "What happened?" he asked, soft. "I got sick at the party," I said. It was automatic. I stared at the floor mat and forced my knees to stop shaking. He knew it was a lie. He didn't push it on the drive. He got me to his place, put me on the couch, brought me a trash can and a blanket, and sat on the armrest like a guard. The next day, I slept until noon and woke up nauseous. My mouth was dry, and my head felt hollow. My brother made toast and set it in front of me and didn't let me dodge with jokes or shrugs. He said, "You need to tell me," and waited. When I said what happened with the drink and how they ignored me saying no, he put his hands on his knees and stared at the floor like he was counting to 10. Then he said, "We had to go to the police." I said no. I said I didn't want our parents to know about the party or the alcohol, and I didn't want to sit in a room and repeat the whole thing to a stranger and then have them call me irresponsible for going there in the first place. He said that wasn't how it worked. I said maybe not, but I couldn't handle it. We went in circles. He was angry, not at me, at them, and at the idea that they'd get away with it. I told him I just wanted to be home. He said, "I won't tell Mom and Dad for now, but you need a plan." We agreed on remote learning for the rest of the year. He emailed the school counselor from my account while I sat next to him and nodded. When Tyler texted me that night, "You good?" I blocked him, and then blocked the unknown numbers that followed with jokes and a video request, and a "LOL you were wild." I'm 19 now and in college in a different city. I'm in therapy. I still don't go to house parties, and I watch every drink, even with people I trust. I never told my parents what happened that night because I don't want to see their faces turn into something I can't undo, and because a part of me still thinks they'll ask why I went. Some days I think about filing a report anyway, just to have it down somewhere official, their names on paper, even if nothing comes of it. Other days I focus on class and laundry and appointments and pretend it was just a bad night that ended. It wasn't. But I'm still moving. And for now, that's what I can do. When I was 9 years old, something happened at a water park in Florida that I didn't fully understand until I was in my 20s. Every summer back then, my family would drive down from New Jersey to visit my grandmother in Tampa for 2 weeks. July 2007 was the year my parents decided to take us to this new place called Wave Park, a huge complex with dozens of slides and pools. My little sister Emily was 6, and my cousin Marcus, who was 11, came with us. We got there early and spent the whole morning running around trying different attractions, and my dad kept saying to stick to the plan, meet back by the kiddie area if we got split up. After lunch, Marcus said he was tired of the slides and wanted to float on the lazy river, so we grabbed inflatable tubes and let the current carry us through artificial caves and waterfalls. We went around twice, bumping into each other and laughing, before Marcus said he needed to use the bathroom. The restrooms were in a separate building past the lounge chair area. Marcus went inside and I waited outside with our tubes because I didn't want to lose them. I remember standing there, dripping, trying to balance both tubes and not block the doorway. People kept walking by with trays of nachos and frozen lemonades. A lifeguard blew a whistle somewhere behind me. Nothing felt weird yet, just crowded and loud. I glanced toward the kiddie area where Mom and Aunt Sarah had planted themselves under a shade umbrella, and I thought about heading that way. Then I figured Marcus would come right out and we'd go back to the river. He was usually fast. A woman around 40 walked up wearing a blue polo with the Wave Park logo. She had a lanyard and a key card, the kind of stuff employees wore, and she smiled like she already knew me. "You look a little lost," she said. I told her no. I was waiting for my cousin. She said she'd seen my mom looking for me near the main entrance, and if I wanted, she could take me there right now. It wasn't far. I hesitated because my mom knew we'd gone to the lazy river. The woman's expression tightened just a little, and she said something had happened with Emily, and we needed to hurry. That scared me enough that I said, "Okay." I didn't drop the tubes. I hooked my elbows through them because I didn't want to get yelled at for leaving park property lying around. We started walking, but instead of going toward the visible paths, she cut us into these service corridors between buildings where there were no other guests, just dumpsters and the backs of concession stands. "Why are we going this way?" I asked. "Faster," she said, not looking back. I kept up because Emily was the word that kept repeating in my head. I figured maybe Emily had fallen, or thrown up, or something simple but urgent. I didn't really know. About a minute later, we reached a metal door marked "Staff Only." The woman pulled out the key card and beeped the lock. The door popped and she pushed it open with her shoulder like she'd done it 100 times. Cool air spilled out. I stopped on the threshold. Inside was a plain concrete hallway, fluorescent lights, exposed pipes, no people. It didn't look like anything a guest should be in. I said, "I don't feel comfortable going in there." My dad's voice was in my head about not going out of sight with strangers, even if they wore a shirt with a logo. She reached back and grabbed my hand, not gently, and started to pull me toward the doorway. "Your mom is right around the corner," she said, and her voice wasn't smiling anymore. The tubes bumped my legs, and I dug my heels into the wet concrete. I said, "Can you get her to come here?" She gave my hand a harder yank. I remember thinking I'd drop the tubes and run, but my fingers wouldn't let go. That's when Marcus came out of the bathroom and yelled my name. His voice was sharp, the way he yelled when we played tag, and he actually meant it. The woman immediately let go of my hand, turned, and walked fast the other way along the service path. She didn't look at us. She just kept her head down and cleared the corner of a building in like 3 seconds. By the time I thought to follow, she was gone. Marcus jogged over and looked at the staff-only door. "Who was that?" he asked. I said she worked here, I thought, and she said Mom was looking for me. He frowned. "Mom's not at the entrance." I explained the part about Emily and how the lady said we had to hurry. Marcus shook his head in this hard, grown-up way he did sometimes. "Let's go now," he said. He took one of the tubes off my arm so I could move faster, and we started running back the way we'd come, cutting past the shade umbrellas and the ice cream stand, staying in the open with other families around. We reached the kiddie area in less than a minute. Mom was exactly where we'd left her, sitting under the umbrella with Emily next to her and Aunt Sarah scrolling on her phone. Emily was fine. She was eating animal crackers and had the crumbs stuck to her mouth. We talked over each other, me and Marcus, telling Mom about the woman, the uniform, the key card, the hallway, all of it. Mom didn't interrupt or ask us to slow down. She just stared at our hands where the tubes had rubbed my skin red, and then up at the staff-only building in the distance. When we told her what happened, her face went white. Security radioed someone and 2 officers walked us past the snack stands to a little office with a humming AC unit and a desk covered in lost and found bracelets. They sat me down and asked me to start from the moment Marcus went into the bathroom. I told it straight. Blue polo, logo, lanyard. The way she said Emily's name. The hand on my wrist. "Describe her," one of them said, clicking a pen. Short red hair, freckles across the nose, about 5'7", maybe a little taller than my mom. I guessed her age around 40. They nodded without reacting and pulled out a binder. It had printouts of every female staff member on duty that day. I went page by page. I didn't recognize any of them. I said that felt crazy because I was sure she worked there. That's when the older officer told us something that made my mom lean in. The park sold child-sized employee polos in the gift shop as souvenirs, but they didn't stock adult sizes there. "Adults get theirs from HR," he said. "If you saw a full uniform, someone either borrowed it, stole it, or bought a fake." They brought up camera feeds. The angle where I'd been standing outside the bathroom wasn't covered. You could see the lazy river entrance, but the bathroom walkway had a blind spot. The only footage they had showed the back of me walking with a woman toward the service area. The freeze frame looked like us, but her face was turned, half hidden by a concrete pillar. One of the officers tried sharpening it. It stayed a blur. He printed a still anyway and clipped it to the report. "This helps establish direction," he said, like that meant something to me. Police came in about 30 minutes later. 2 uniforms, 1 detective in plain clothes. He asked the same questions again, then different ones. Did she say my name? Number. Did she touch anything besides my hand? The door. Did I see a badge number? Number. "You did the right thing stopping at the door," he said. And then to Marcus. "Good timing, kid." Marcus didn't look proud. He stared at the printed still like it might decide to get clearer if he stared hard enough. They took statements from my mom and Aunt Sarah too. The detective went out to look at the staff-only corridor and came back with a map. The door I'd almost gone through led to maintenance tunnels that connected to the filtration building and the employee parking lot. There were exits that bypassed the main gates. They didn't find her. We sat there while security supervisors made calls, and the detective walked the service paths with 2 park managers. The radios kept crackling. Nothing. After another hour, the park manager came back with this tight smile and apologized. He offered us free tickets for a future visit and said they were reviewing procedures. My dad kept the tickets, but put them in his wallet like he planned to forget them there. We left without telling Emily the details. On the drive back to my grandmother's, Mom cried once, very quietly. We went home to New Jersey the same day. I didn't think about that day seriously for years. I filed it under weird stuff that ended okay. Then when I was 23, I saw a story on the news about a child abducted from a water park in California. The suspect was a woman in a fake employee uniform. Same playbook. She told the kid there was a parent hurt near a staff area. The security camera clip showed the woman guiding the kid by the elbow toward a maintenance door. I felt my stomach drop like I was 9 again. I called Marcus as soon as the segment ended. We actually talked about it. Like adults, not cousins swapping camp stories. We traced every step. He said, if I'd taken longer in the bathroom, and I cut him off. If you'd taken longer, I'd be gone. He was quiet, and then admitted he'd always felt guilty for leaving me outside alone, because he was older and supposed to watch out for me. I told him he did. He saved me. We looked up maps of big parks and saw how those service corridors run like veins under everything, and how an exit to the employee lot can get you out fast with no one noticing. We both wished our parents had pushed for more, but it was 2007. Cameras weren't everywhere, and there wasn't proof of intent, just a kid and a stranger near a door. Now I have 2 kids. I don't let them out of my sight in public places, not for a minute. I tell them uniforms don't equal safety, and if anyone says I'm hurt, they find a cop or a mom with kids and they scream and run. It probably sounds extreme to other parents at birthday parties, but I don't care. That woman at Wave Park knew exactly what she was doing, and I wasn't the first kid she tried it on. This past February, my kids and I had to temporarily move out of our house because of a serious pipe leak and the repairs that followed. I'm a single dad with 2 teenagers, 15-year-old Ethan and 13-year-old Sarah. And for once, the insurance company didn't fight me. They agreed to cover temporary housing while the demo and replumb happened. Sounds simple, but every apartment I called either wanted a deposit the size of a car or had 1 bedroom and a kitchenette. We needed 3 beds and doors that closed. After 2 days of hunting, I found a private listing, a 2-story place in the mountains of western Colorado, about 40 minutes from the nearest town. The price was reasonable because, according to the owner, you'll earn it on the drive. 3 weeks, month to month if needed. No pets? No parties? He asked. I laughed and said we're too tired for either. The kids took it as a win. Snow and no neighbors, Ethan said. Can we sled? Sarah wanted to know if there was Wi-Fi, which there was, allegedly. I worried about the school run. The bus didn't go to the house. There was a highway pull-off they could use if we got them there on time. I mapped it out twice. I told them we'd try it for a week and reevaluate. They nodded. Teenagers will agree to anything if you promise a break from drywall dust and the smell of wet wood. We arrived on a Saturday afternoon. The house was a solid 2-story made of dark wood, tucked between pines and big chunks of rock. Snow was up to the knees anywhere the plow hadn't touched, and the road in looked like someone did it between storms and gave up near the mailbox. Inside, it was chilly. The heaters worked though, and after a few minutes of groaning and clicking, they breathed warm air. The place was furnished like a rental. Sturdy couch, wobbly end table, a TV that might have survived 3 moves, but nothing looked broken. The kids staked out rooms upstairs. Ethan grabbed the one with a desk. Sarah took the one with the slightly bigger closet and a window that faced a slope. I took the downstairs bedroom because of my back and because I like being near the front door. We unpacked enough to live. Clothes, chargers, some kitchen stuff, and ate dinner from a cooler. Pasta and jarred sauce. The stove worked. Small victory. By 9:30, the house felt settled. Sarah showered and came down in a hoodie, wet hair leaving dark spots on the fabric. Ethan asked where the bus stop was again, and I showed him on my phone. We leave at 6:15, I said. He made a face but didn't argue. At 10, they headed upstairs. Good night, Dad. Good night, love you, I said back. I stayed in the living room, sitting on the edge of a box, answering a few work emails I'd ignored all day. My laptop barely held a charge, so I kept it plugged in and told myself not to fall asleep there. Around 10:30, I heard a sound outside. It was the crunch of snow, slow and heavy, like someone putting weight down carefully. I glanced at the living room window. It was just black glass with my face in it. The porch light cut a small triangle over the front steps. Nothing moved. I told myself it was a deer. We'd already seen tracks on the driveway. I went back to the laptop, reread the same sentence twice. The crunch came again, closer to the wall now, moving along the side of the house toward the backyard. I stood and listened harder. Another step. Then quiet. I didn't want to wake the kids over nothing, but I'm not the guy who ignores footsteps and pretends it's the wind. I grabbed the flashlight from the entry table, slid the back door bolt, and stepped onto the small rear porch. The cold hit fast. I swept the beam over the yard. Trees. Snow. The outline of the shed near the tree line. No tracks I could see from the porch. No breath clouds except mine. It was quiet in a way that made you check your own shoes. "Hello?" I said, because people do dumb stuff like get stuck or drunk and wander. Nothing answered. I held the light a few seconds longer, then backed in, locked the door, and checked it twice. I stood there with my hand on the deadbolt, listening. The house creaked once. That was it. A few minutes passed. I was about to power down and call it when someone hit the front door. 3 hard knocks, spaced like they were counting. My heart jumped. The kids were upstairs, asleep. I walked to the foyer, keeping my steps even so I didn't sound nervous. I didn't turn on the hall lamp. Through the peephole, just darkness and the flare of the porch bulb on the top rail. No person, no truck, nothing. "Who's there?" I asked. My voice sounded normal. I was proud of that. No answer. "Hello?" I tried again. "Are you okay? Do you need help?" 3 more knocks, louder this time, the wood shuddering in the frame. I went upstairs and woke the kids one at a time, whispering their names and telling them to grab sweatshirts and come with me. Ethan blinked hard and asked if there was a fire. I said no, but someone was at the door and I needed them to move quietly. We went down together and I put them in the first floor bathroom and locked it from the inside with them. Through the door, I told them to sit on the rug and keep their phones silenced. I cracked the door to look toward the foyer and listened. The footsteps shifted on the porch again, then slid along the siding like someone trying to see into the windows. I called out, asking who it was and what they wanted. No answer, just the sound of boots moving from the window to the corner post and back again. I pulled my phone and dialed 911, kept my voice steady, and gave the address the owner had texted earlier. I told the dispatcher we were in a remote rental and someone was knocking hard and now prowling the porch. She said a unit was coming, but the roads were bad and it would be at least 25 minutes. While I was answering her questions, something slammed the front door. It was a heavy hit, not a hand, and wood cracked loud enough that Sarah gasped from the bathroom. I told the kids to stay put and told the dispatcher the door had been struck. She said to move to a room without exterior windows if possible and to keep the line open. I asked again who it was and said the police were coming. Another blow landed, then a scraping metal sound against the lock area like a pry bar to the latch. The deadbolt rattled and held. I moved to the side of the hallway where I had some cover and told the dispatcher exactly what I was hearing. The steps paused and I heard a low grunt, then the metal sound again. I pictured a crowbar wedged where the wood had already split. The door frame creaked. I felt the bathroom door behind me as I backed up and decided we needed to change rooms right then. I opened the bathroom and told them we were going to the far bedroom, the one with the dresser we'd pushed earlier for space. Ethan nodded, grabbed Sarah's wrist, and we moved fast down the short hall. I shut the bedroom door, turned the lock, and we dragged the dresser across the floor until it wedged tight. The impacts kept coming, 5 or 6 more hits, spaced like someone catching their breath between swings. Each one sent a vibration through the floor that we could feel under our feet. We sat on the far side of the bed in the dark, phones in our hands, not talking. The house went quiet except for the faint hum of the heater. The quiet stretched too long. I told the dispatcher I couldn't hear anything anymore, and she said the unit was close. I listened for footsteps, engine noise, anything. Nothing. We waited like that until red and blue light washed faintly across the ceiling and a voice outside shouted, "Sheriff's office." I left the kids in the room and went to meet the deputies. The front door looked like it had been smashed with a sledge. Deep dents, a split along the strike plate, and a gouge where metal had pried. The deadbolt was bent, but still in place. 2 deputies cleared the downstairs while another called out up the stairs. Ethan answered, and they brought the kids to the living room. The sheriff arrived a few minutes later in a bigger SUV, older guy, steady voice, asked me to walk through everything from the first knocks to the last hit. He listened and didn't interrupt. They checked the porch and the yard. There were clear footprints leading from the driveway edge along the side of the house and out to the tree line, and none coming back. No tire tracks besides ours and the plow from earlier. No cigarette butts, no drop tools, nothing left behind. The sheriff said it could be local. Someone who knew the place stayed empty most winters and saw our lights. He said sometimes people come up looking for copper or looking for a place to crash, and they get bold when they think nobody's home. It didn't explain the persistence or how they disappeared into the trees. He recommended we stay with family or move to town while they did extra patrols. I told him we'd pack at first light. He gave me a case number and his card and said to call if we heard anything else that night. The deputies offered to wait outside while we tried to sleep. We didn't. We packed what we could and left right after sunrise, dropped the key in the lockbox like the owner asked, and rented a short-term place in town. The attacker was never found, and the door never made another sound in my dreams. But I still watch windows now, and I still answer knocks like they might be a test. When I retired at 63, I bought myself a small cottage on the outskirts of a quiet town, the kind of place where neighbors kept to themselves, and you could actually see stars at night. The place wasn't fancy, but it felt right the second I saw it. 2 acres of rough lawn and garden beds that needed love, a big old pear tree that dropped fruit like marbles in September, and a greenhouse that made me feel like I'd finally earned something after all those years shuffling papers. I liked that nobody bothered me. I liked that I could hear my own thoughts. Charlie, my fox terrier, took to the property like it was his job. He patrolled the fence line every morning with his little soldier's march, nose down, tail up, and then would flop on the back step as if he'd saved us from a small invasion. We had routines. Coffee at 6, greenhouse by 8, a nap after lunch if my knees barked at me, and in the evening we'd walk the edges with a flashlight just to make sure gates were latched and nothing had wandered in. I know that sounds a little dramatic, but I lived alone and I slept better when I'd seen the corners. It was mid-July, one of those weeks where the heat pressed down even at night, when it happened. I went to bed around 10 with the bedroom windows wide open. The air was thick and slow. Charlie slept downstairs in his bed by the back door like always. I woke up to Charlie barking like I'd never heard him bark before. He's a talker, sure, but this was aggressive, fast, almost a warning bark stacked on top of itself. It came from downstairs. I swung my legs out of bed and felt that heavy heat hit me again, and I remember thinking, fine, I'm coming. I turned lights on as I went. Hallway, landing, first step creaking because it always does. and when I hit the bottom, Charlie was at the back door, nails scratching the wood hard enough to leave marks, growling at whatever was past the glass. I glanced at the yard, expecting that white splash of the motion light, but it was dark. That light is touchy. It turns on when a moth sneezes. It was off now, which made no sense if something was moving out there. I said, "What are you on about?" More to keep my voice steady than anything, and reached into the kitchen drawer for my flashlight. Habit. I clicked it once to make sure the batteries were good, unlatched the back door, and stepped onto the patio with Charlie. He shot forward like he'd been waiting for permission and tore across the lawn toward the greenhouse. I swung the beam after him, and that's when I saw it. One of the big panes on the greenhouse was gone completely. Not cracked, not spidered, just gone. Shattered. The flashlight caught the field of glass on the grass outside, glittering like frost. Outside, not inside, which struck me as wrong immediately. "Hey!" I called out, because that's what you do even when you know no one's going to answer. The sound died out past the fruit trees. I kept the beam steady on the greenhouse and started walking. Charlie circled the broken side in quick, agitated loops, his nails ticking on the paving stones. I said, "Charlie, leave it." But he ignored me, staring past the greenhouse toward the tree line like there was something there he couldn't stand. I stopped a few feet from the opening and lifted the flashlight higher. The hole in the glass wasn't punched clean. There were jagged teeth along the frame and a chunk still hanging by the putty, big enough for a person. And the glass outside meant it had blown outward. Whatever force made that mess came from inside. I stepped closer. Careful, careful. The way you are when you're trying not to do something dumb. And looked through the gap. Inside the greenhouse, my neat rows were gone. Clay pots lay on their sides like someone had swept an arm across them. Dirt mounded under the shelves. The hose I kept coiled on the hook was dragged across the floor, kinked and muddy. My work table, an old door on sawhorses, had been shoved aside, not a little bit either. And on top of it sat a dark backpack that I absolutely did not own. It wasn't gardening gear. It looked like the kind of bag a student wears, straps hanging, a smear of dirt on the front. For a second I thought it might be my old seed bag, and then my brain caught up. No, wrong shape, wrong everything. Charlie barked hard enough to make my arm jolt, then went silent, staring into the trees. His body was stiff, tail up but not wagging. Ready, if that makes sense. Ready to go after something, or ready to be gone if it came back. I didn't touch the backpack. I didn't even step through the broken frame. I just stood there with the flashlight in one hand, and the other hand up like that would help somehow. I could smell the damp soil from where the pots spilled, and that jolted me into thinking straight. Someone had been in my greenhouse. Not last week. Not earlier that day. Recently. Recently enough that Charlie had caught the scent or the sound and pulled me out of bed. I looked at the glass again, the way it lay outside like a spill, and played the sequence in my head. They were inside. Something happened. Panic. A noise. Charlie's bark. And they went through the glass fast. Out. Not in. I whispered, "Okay," to myself, and scanned the property line. The beam faded against the dark beyond the pear tree. The woods past my fence were just shapes, but I could feel the direction of it, the line a person would take if they didn't want to be seen. From the greenhouse to the gap by the compost, then into the trees. The backpack sat right where they'd left it, straps sprawled, like their hand had been on it until the last second and they'd had to choose. They chose to run. I went back inside immediately, locked every door and window, and kept Charlie with me the rest of the night. I sat at the kitchen table with the flashlight and my phone and tried to listen past the hum of the fridge. Charlie lay on my feet, alert but quiet, watching the back door. I dozed in short bursts with the lights on. At first light, I clipped his leash and went out to the greenhouse. I walked the perimeter, checked the corners, and then stood at the broken panel. Glass was still scattered on the grass. It was clearly pushed out, not in. I stepped inside carefully and went to the work table. The backpack sat there like someone planned to return. I unzipped it. Inside were tools, wire cutters, a flashlight, work gloves, a coil of rope, and an empty sports water bottle. No ID, no papers, nothing personal. The flashlight worked when I clicked it. I put everything back and looked around for more damage. 2 trays of seedlings were crushed, and the hose was dragged across the floor. My small radio lay on its side with the antenna bent. There was a boot print in the spilled dirt, deep at the heel, leading straight to the hole. The tread had a small diamond shape. I took a couple of photos on my phone. Outside, I followed a faint line of flattened grass toward the woods. It faded by the compost heap and picked up again at the fence gap. Charlie pulled that direction and gave one sharp whine. I turned us back to the house. I thought about calling the police but decided against it because nothing was stolen, and the damage was one broken panel. I could hear the script in my head, and the part where they'd say to file a report and wait. I wanted to fix it first. The next day, I had new locks installed on every entrance and started bringing Charlie inside at night instead of his outdoor kennel on hot nights. The locksmith showed me the deadbolts and handed me spare keys. For a while, I kept a heavy chair under the back door handle even though I knew it wouldn't stop much. I replaced the greenhouse panel and swept glass out of the grass until my back ached. I threw away the backpack and everything in it. I didn't want it in my shed, and I didn't want to imagine strange hands on my things. For months, I slept light and kept a small flashlight on the nightstand. Any creak had me at the window. Charlie slept on a blanket in my room and watched the door. If the motion light clicked on, I watched the yard until it went dark again. I kept a rake by the back steps like that would matter. A neighbor said a few weeks later that a drifter had been seen sleeping in sheds and outbuildings, but nobody had seen him since summer ended. I nodded and said I hoped he found help, the polite thing to say. What I meant was that I hoped he left. I put up a second motion light and trimmed the hedges low along the fence. I lived there 11 more years without another incident. When I finally sold and moved closer to my kids, I walked the property one last time and checked the greenhouse door twice. I still think about it when I wake at 4 for no reason. What if Charlie hadn't woken me? What if the person in my greenhouse had stayed hidden longer? What would I have opened the door to a week later? About 20 years ago now, well, actually just last year, I was working as a graphic designer at an ad agency downtown and riding the subway every day. 3 stops from my apartment to work, 15 minutes, 20 if the train stalled. I always got in the same car, third from the front, because it stopped right at the exit at my station and shaved a minute off the walk. That Tuesday, I stayed till 9 finishing a client deck that had to be on the creative director's desk by morning. My brain felt like chewed gum. The platform was almost empty, late enough that the buskers had packed it in. I sat in my usual car near the middle. Maybe 5 people total. A couple in suits whispering. A guy nodding off with his backpack hugged to his chest. An older woman with a tote. And a man in a dark coat and hat way down at the opposite end, head bent to his phone. I put in my earbuds and let a playlist run. I remember thinking how nice the quiet was after a day of feedback pings. At one stop, I looked up and saw the coat guy tilt his head like he was stretching his neck. Nothing weird. I went back to scrolling type references I'd saved for a different project, because that's how my brain unwinds. Work with more work. At my station, I got off and walked to the escalator. I was thinking about whether to tweak the headline "Kerning by a hair," I know, riveting, and fished my card out at the turnstiles. As I stepped through, I glanced back and saw the same man in the dark coat about 10 meters behind. Same hat, same stride. I told myself it was nothing. We got off at the same stop. Outside, it's 6 blocks to my apartment. The streets there are quiet at night. The kind of quiet where you hear your own footsteps. Half the streetlights in that stretch are dim. Around the 3rd block, I did that casual phone check that's really a look behind, and the man was still there, keeping that same distance like we were attached by a string. I turned onto a side street that doesn't lead to my building, little zigzag I sometimes take if the main street looks sketchy, and watched in the reflection of a storefront. He turned too. My heart kicked up. I sped up without running. He sped up just enough to match. I did the math. 2 blocks ahead, there's a 24-hour store with those bright aisles that make you feel like you're on a stage. I went for it. The bell on the door jingled and I stood by the window with a basket I didn't need, pretending to compare noodles while watching the glass. He walked past, didn't even turn his head, just kept going steady like he had somewhere to be. I exhaled so hard the cashier looked over. "You okay?" she said. "Yeah," I lied. "Just late." I bought a soda I didn't want and waited 5 minutes, counting slowly. Then I left and looped home a different way. Inside, I checked the door locks, then checked them again. I told myself I was being dramatic. I still texted my friend a quick, "Got creeped out but I'm fine," before putting the phone face down on the dresser. For the next 2 days, I left work at 6. The subway was full of people and loud in that normal, annoying way that feels safe. I scanned faces without trying to look like I was scanning faces. Nothing set me off. I almost felt stupid for how my pulse had jumped. Friday blew that up. A client presentation ran long and we wrapped close to 8. I packed up slowly on purpose to let the office linger clear. Around 8:30, I headed down. This time I decided not to be predictable. I stood further down the platform and got into a different car. Not my usual. It was maybe a third full, enough bodies to feel buffered but not packed. I opened a book on my phone and tried to read one paragraph, then another, looking up every couple of stops because that's apparently my new hobby. Somewhere after the first station I saw him. Same dark coat, no hat now. He was 3 rows ahead, facing forward, his back to me. For a minute I wasn't sure. Lots of people have dark coats. Then he turned his head in profile to look down the aisle, and I got that sharp jawline, short, neat hair, same as before. My skin did a small electric thing. Okay. Options. I thought through them like a checklist. Confront him? Not smart. Could be nothing, and even if it wasn't, I'm not picking a fight underground. Get off and go to a station agent? Maybe. But if I was wrong, I'd feel like an idiot filing a report about a feeling. The train slowed for my stop. I stayed put. I watched him shift, like he was easing his shoulders, and I let my station slide by. At the next one, I stayed too. 2 extra stops. Then I got off, crossed the platform, and switched lines. I stood where I could see the reflections in the dark glass and waited for another train. I took the long way back, changing again so the return path wasn't a mirror of the first. I didn't love losing the time, but the logic felt clean. By the time I came up at my station, the platforms had rotated a fresh set of strangers. I kept my bag in front, walked with purpose, cut down streets with better light. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe he'd been going home like anyone else. But when my building door clicked behind me and I stood in my entry in that small rectangle of safety, I knew I'd made the only choice that didn't leave me second-guessing myself later. Got home only an hour later, but I was sure he wasn't nearby. Next week I started taking the bus to work even though it added 20 minutes. It felt slower but safer. I could watch the sidewalks, read the routes, bail out early if something looked wrong. Tuesday around 7 on the way home, the bus slowed for my stop. I stood, glanced through the smeared glass, and saw him. Same dark coat. He was at the stop where I was supposed to get off, standing a little back from the shelter like he was pretending to check a schedule. I sat down fast and let the doors close. I rode to the end of the line, got off with the last few people, and called a taxi from the lit corner by a bakery. The driver talked about soccer. I stared at the mirror and watched the streets behind us for a gray car or that coat. I didn't see either. Wednesday, I worked from home. I told my boss I needed to finish revisions and she said fine. I kept the blinds tilted and moved rooms a couple of times just to break the pattern. Nobody buzzed my building. No knocks. I tried to focus on layouts but kept checking the peephole. Thursday, I went in. By evening, I didn't want the subway, so I asked a coworker, Lena, for a ride. She didn't ask questions, just said, "Sure, hop in." We talked about a stubborn banner ad while she drove. At a long light, I glanced at the side mirror. 2 cars back sat a gray sedan. The driver wore a dark coat. His face was hidden by the angle and the headrest. I couldn't make out features, just the outline. My mouth went dry. "Can you take Jefferson instead?" I asked, like I suddenly remembered an errand. "Yeah," she said, turning. The gray sedan turned too. "Actually, sorry, make another right. I forgot the bank." Now she looked at me. "Everything okay?" "Yeah, just need cash," I said, and hated how fake it sounded. We made 2 more turns. The sedan hesitated, then fell back into other traffic. I had her drop me on the next street over. I walked the rest. Friday evening, I was home alone when my cell rang. Unknown number. I answered because freelancers answer numbers they don't know. There was silence, then slow, heavy breathing like someone wanted me to hear them. It lasted a few seconds, then the call ended. My hands shook. Half an hour later, my phone rang again. Same thing. I blocked it. Saturday, another unknown number popped up. I let it go to voicemail. When I checked, it was 2 minutes of breathing and a faint rustle, like a sleeve or a hand on the mic. I saved it. I printed my call log. Then I went to the police station. I told the officer about the subway, the bus stop, the gray sedan, and the calls. She listened, took the numbers, and typed. She said, "Without threats or him touching you, we're limited. We'll file a report. Change your routes. Do not engage. Document everything. If he shows up or calls again, dial right away." She handed me a sheet with safety tips and circled the non-emergency line. It wasn't satisfying, but it was reasonable. 2 weeks later, I moved in with a friend across town, changed my number, and asked my boss to let me work remote. 4 months have passed with no more calls. I haven't seen him. I still check mirrors, and when I ride, I study all faces, afraid I'll see him again. I've been working as a night security guard for about 3 years now, mostly at construction sites and warehouses. This summer, I took a job at a warehouse complex on the outskirts of the industrial zone, about an hour from the city. The pay was good because it was the middle of nowhere and nobody wanted the night shift. First week was quiet. Abandoned hangars, busted panes, tall grass between buildings, nothing moving but wind. I got used to the silence and the dead routine. I started bringing paperbacks, a thermos, sometimes a second sandwich in case the first one tasted like cardboard. The road in was an empty stretch with fields on both sides. The nearest house was miles away. If you like being alone and don't scare yourself with your own thoughts, It was perfect. On the 8th night around 1, I was walking the far row of hangars, checking the chains on the service doors, when my flashlight caught a shape tucked behind the 3rd building. A car. It hadn't been there on my first pass. No engine sounds, no headlights on the road, just suddenly there like it had grown out of the weeds. It was an old sedan with no plates and dark tint. I walked up slow, angled my light through the glass, hand near the radio. Empty seats. No trash, no jacket, nothing. The interior smelled like hot plastic when the beam hit it. Strange I hadn't heard it come in. Stranger I hadn't seen it from the corner camera feed. I wrote the make and color in the log and noted no visible occupant, planning to add it to the morning report. Policy-wise, I didn't have enough to call it in beyond that. We get randoms sometimes, kids looking for a place to drink, truckers who pulled off wrong, so I kept moving. 20 minutes later, heading back toward the post, I had to pass that gap again. The car was gone. Not a sound, not a glow on the access road, just tire tracks in the dust arcing out, then disappearing where the wind scuffed them. I stood there listening like an idiot, thinking maybe they'd killed the lights and were crawling. Nothing. I told myself someone had ducked into smoke, freaked when they saw my flashlight, and bailed. Believable enough, so I filed it under, "Not my problem unless they come back." By 3, I was in the guard post finishing my coffee that had gone bitter. I was halfway through a note about a loose latch on Hangar F when I heard knocking on the metal door. Not the buzzer. Knocking. Open palm, steady rhythm. 3 beats. Pause. 3 more. I slid the small window open an inch and said, "Security. State your business." No answer. The knocking started again, a little faster, same methodical force, like someone measuring it out. I flipped the flood above the entrance. The camera washed for a second, then cleared. A man about 40 stood at the door in a dark jacket and a baseball cap. He wasn't looking up at the camera. He had his body angled away. He kept his head down like he was listening to something in his collar. "Sir, property is closed. Step away from the door," I said into the speaker. He raised a hand with a sheet of paper. I couldn't read it from the monitor, just saw it flash white. He said, normal voice volume like he expected me to be right behind the door, "I'm the new guard. Early relief. They sent me. Who sent you?" I asked. Nothing. He kept standing half-turned, the paper still up. It annoyed me that he wouldn't face the camera. Shift change wasn't until 6, and nobody had called. If our supervisor changes anything, he texts both guards and follows with a call. I hadn't gotten anything. "You're not scheduled," I said. "Back up from the door. I'll call management." "It's fine," he said. "They said you'd be tired. I'm here early." He didn't move. The paper dipped, then went up again, like he was playing the part of a guy who brought a memo but didn't want it read. I picked up the desk phone for the supervisor line and glanced at the board to make sure the cameras hadn't dropped. All 8 were up. I scanned out of habit. Front gate clear. Hangar row empty. Fuel shed closed. Then my eyes hit the second monitor, the split for the service entrance behind the post, and I froze. Someone else was standing at the service door. No knocking. No movement. Just there, where nobody ever comes because it's chained from the inside and the door sticks anyway. Hood up, hands tucked, head tilted like they were listening to me talk to the first guy. The distance between the front door and that service entrance is about 20 feet of wall in a corner, and I suddenly felt very aware of how thin the sheet metal was, and how stupid it would be to open either door. I put the phone down without dialing and kept my voice even. "Sir, you need to step away from the entrance." Right now, he didn't respond. He shifted his feet and the paper crinkled. The person behind the post didn't shift at all. I reached under the desk for the heavy flashlight, the kind that doubles as a baton, and slid the chair back to give myself a line to the back room. Radios were charged, emergency horn was within reach, and there's a can of OC spray under the window ledge I've never needed. I thought about hitting the horn just to break the script they were trying to run on me, but that would also announce I was rattled. Instead, I zoomed the rear camera a notch. The hooded figure's face stayed shadowed. No reflective striping, no security patch, no badge lanyard. Just a shape, patient and quiet, precisely where there's no reason to stand. The knocking at the front door stopped. It was quiet for 2 beats. Then he started again. Same rhythm. And that's when I saw on the second monitor that behind the guard post, at the service entrance, another person was standing. He was trying to open the door with a pick or something similar, and the realization hit hard. I put 911 on speaker, grabbed the pepper spray, and locked both doors. The guy at the front hit the metal, yelling about a mistake and documents. While I gave cross streets, the back lock made that breaking sound. The chain was the only thing holding. The dispatcher said officers were en route, not to engage. I looked at the thin walls, the blind corner, and did the math. If they got in, I'd be boxed. There's a side window toward the fence, big enough if you don't hesitate. I killed the call, clipped the spray, cleared the desk, and popped the latch. The front guy slammed the door again, shouting about verifying credentials. The chain behind me snapped. I went. I slid through the window, dropped to gravel, kept low along the fence. Inside, I heard them come in. Chair scraping, radio skittering, a curse when they saw the empty chair. The fence had dull wire, but a corner pole sat low. I used the service bucket as a step, pulled up, rolled over, the spray clamped in my teeth for a second. I hit the other side, got my feet, and ran straight to the gate. My car was just outside the reader. Keys and phone were on me. I hit unlock while moving. Behind me, a door banged open. Someone yelled, "Hey!" I didn't look. I yanked the door, slid in, cranked the engine, and dropped it in drive. Gravel spit, the post blurred, and I was on the access road. In the mirror, I saw 2 at the gate. One lifted a hand, hesitated. The other had a phone to his ear. I kept it at the limit, then a little over, watching the mirror and the shoulder for lights off. No one followed. My hands buzzed on the wheel. The dispatcher said patrol would hit the site in 20 minutes. I told her I wasn't returning until they were on scene. "Gas station, 10 miles, I said. "Stay on the line," she said, so I did, and she kept me talking until my breathing evened out. When officers reached the warehouse, nobody was there. The post was trashed, chair broken, drawers dumped. The tower PC and the DVR were gone. They knew where to grab them. The screws were pulled clean. Cameras caught faces, not identities. I met patrol at the gas station and gave my statement. They swept the buildings. No sedan. Tire marks at the gap. Fresh boot prints by the service door. Average size, common tread. I signed the form with a shaky hand and kept the spray in my lap. I quit the next day. Management called and emailed. Promises about better locks, a second guard, brighter lights, a company phone. I thanked them, turned in my badge, and left the thermos in the box so I wouldn't have to go back. HR asked if I'd reconsider after a week. I said I wasn't going to be the guy in the chair if they tried again. A follow-up officer called later. No matches on faces. Plates missing. VIN covered. Probably a crew testing response times. Shopping for an easy site. I keep thinking about what would have happened if I hadn't seen that second figure on the monitor. If I'd cracked the door to read his paper. Maybe they only wanted the DVR. Maybe I was part of the plan. A problem to solve fast and quiet. I'll never know, and I'm okay with that. So this happened about 2 years ago when I was living alone for the first time in a third-floor apartment near campus. I was 19, second year of college, and for once my parents were sticking to "we trust you" instead of calling 3 times a day. The building was old but fine, brick outside, creaky stairs, and a locked entrance with a buzzer. That week I'd ordered textbooks for spring classes and had the tracking emails open like a scoreboard. Wednesday around 11, my doorbell buzzed. I didn't check the peephole because I was sure it was the delivery. I opened it, and there's this guy, maybe 30, in what looked like a courier uniform, navy shirt and dark pants, holding a tablet and a medium box. He goes, "Jessica Morgan?" And I said yes. He kept his eyes on the tablet, scrolling, muttering like he was confirming an address or a unit number. That distracted, slightly rushed vibe delivery people get when they're trying to make quota. I remember thinking he looked new. He wasn't doing the fake cheerful thing. No small talk, no "sign here for me." He kept swiping. His hair was cut short, nothing unique about him. But I noticed there wasn't a logo anywhere. I didn't care yet. I just wanted my book so I could stop refreshing the reading list like a clown. He shifted the box from one arm to the other, glanced past me into the apartment like he was checking for a dog. I don't have one. And then did this quick half smile that didn't reach his eyes. Then he looked up at me and said, "So the knee's doing better? Surgery went well?" I just stood there. 3 weeks before, I'd had arthroscopic surgery on my left knee after tearing cartilage at volleyball practice. I'd told my parents, my brother, my roommate from last year, and Carol down the hall because she kept making me sit while she brought mail up. No one else. I'd made a point of not blasting it online because I didn't want pity comments or the whole "what happened" thing. I definitely hadn't filled out anything medical while ordering books. "How did you know about my knee?" I asked. He blinked like I'd put him on the spot. Then he stammered something about a recipient questionnaire, said the company asks about accessibility needs for upper floors, and he must have skimmed my note. It didn't make sense. I know what forms I fill out. I'd used guest checkout on one site and my saved account on another. He shuffled again, the box pressed against his chest, and I finally looked at his shirt properly. Plain navy. No patch. No company name on the tablet case. No scanner holstered on his belt. My stomach tightened. "Which company are you with?" I asked. He answered too fast. "Courier." Just that. And then he shoved the tablet at me with a stylus clipped to the side. "Signature," he said. I hesitated, because every warning about scams I'd rolled my eyes at suddenly didn't feel so extra. But the box had my name, full and correct, with my apartment number. The label looked real. And honestly, the idea that I was being dramatic shoved its way back in. If he wanted to rob me, why do it in the middle of the day on a floor with other doors 10 feet away? "My hands are a little shaky," I said, which they were. I signed a messy version of my name, took the box, and shut the door. Locked the deadbolt. Chain on. I put the package on the coffee table and sat down like I just had an argument I lost. It took a minute to open the box because I kept replaying the knee comment, hearing his tone, trying to decide if he'd been fishing or confident. Inside were the exact books I ordered. Same titles, shrink-wrapped, receipts tucked in. No weirdness there. I pulled up the bookstore site on my laptop. Order history, addresses, saved info. No mention of accessibility, nothing about injuries. I checked the other site where I grabbed used copies. Same thing. I went into my email and searched the order numbers, then scanned the privacy policy like that would magically explain it. I couldn't find anything that even asked about stairs. While I was doing that, my knee twinged, which was annoying because it made me feel like I was being dramatic about the exact thing I was trying not to obsess over. I texted Carol. "Did you see a delivery guy on our floor? Navy shirt. Said something weird." She texted back immediately, she always does, asking what he said. I told her, asked about my knee surgery. She called me instead of texting, which is her style when something sounds wrong. "Repeat it," she said. I did. She was quiet for a second. Then she asked if I'd told anyone else in the building about the surgery. I said no, and she reminded me she hadn't said anything either. "Okay," she said. "So he either knows you, or he wants you to think he knows you." I said, "But he had the right box, Carol. My books are here." She asked if he had a logo. I said no. She swore under her breath. She's not paranoid. She's worked nights at the hospital for years, lots of security briefings, lots of stories. "Companies don't send guys in plain shirts anymore," she said. "Not to residential, not with a tablet like that." I said delivery services sometimes hire third-party drivers. She said that's true, but they still have badges, or at least branded tape, something identifiable. What did the tablet screen look like? I told her there was a signature line and my name at the top. She asked if I took a photo. I hadn't. She exhaled hard. Then she said it sounded really off, and I should check if the building had security cameras. Next day, I went to the building manager's office and told him everything. He's an older guy, knows every leak in the place, and he didn't brush me off. He brought me into the back room with the monitors and scrubbed through my floor's feed. We pulled up Wednesday, paused when my buzzer went, and I pointed at the courier at my door. Then he said, "Want to see if he scoped the place earlier?" And rewound a few days. It landed on Sunday night. Late. Hallway empty. A figure in dark clothes walked up to my door and stopped, close enough to touch the peephole. They didn't knock. They just stood there. The manager froze the frame. "See the head tilt?" Ear to the door. My stomach dropped. The timestamp said a little past 10. I knew exactly where I was. Front hallway, phone to my ear, pacing and complaining about physical therapy costs, laying out surgery and recovery details for my mom. I remember leaning on the wall because my knee was aching. I was inches from that door while someone listened. We let the clip run. After a few minutes, the person turned like they heard something inside, then drifted out of frame. No clear face. Hood up, cap under it, mask. The manager tried the stairwell camera. Nothing but a shoulder once. He checked the main entrance. No entry that matched. He grunted. Either tailgated in or used service. The basement camera showed a blur in the corner and then nothing. He suggested I get a wide-angle peephole and change my locks. "Today if you can," he said. "I'll put in a work order, but a locksmith is faster." I said yes. He said he'd file an incident report and send it to his police contact, but warned me, no face, no ID, they'll just log it. By the end of the week, the new peephole was in and I had fresh keys. I slept with my phone on loud and my shoes near the bed. The manager said the police logged it but wouldn't come unless there was a repeat. For 2 weeks, I jumped at every cartwheel on the tile. I checked the peephole for any knock, even when I'd ordered food. When we rewatched the delivery day, there was no record of the guy entering or leaving the main entrance. No package on the lobby table. Nothing. "Basement service door," the manager said again, annoyed. He knew the blind spots. Carol showed up with pepper spray and a short lecture. "Hand on it when you answer," she said, curling my fingers around it. I started carrying my phone just to get water at night. I took photos of every delivery person and asked them to hold up a badge. Most were fine. A couple rolled their eyes. I didn't care. I moved out at the end of the semester. New place, 5th floor, fobbed elevator, better cameras, A front desk that actually asks names. I wish that fixed it. The worst part is not knowing who that man was or why he targeted me, random, or because I was 19 and limping alone. I don't have a neat ending. I don't talk about anything important near a door now, and I check every delivery through the peephole first. And sometimes I think about how close his ear was to the wood while I told my mom I felt safe. I keep the chain latched, I make people repeat their names, and I save every receipt and photo because proof helps me feel in control. The school security guard, Marcus, had the guy pinned face first against the hallway wall while I stood there with shaking hands, realizing this man had driven 900 miles to save me. His backpack was on the floor, contents spilling out, printouts of my videos, maps of the school grounds, photos of my house and car. I could see the handle of a folding knife among the papers, and a bright orange megaphone that he'd apparently planned to use for some kind of demonstration right here in front of my students. The secretary was on the phone with 911, her voice tight and professional, while the man, David, he'd said his name was David, kept shouting that I'd betrayed the cause and that he was here to finish what we started. 6 months ago, I'd made what I thought was a simple decision to help my history students by recording a few YouTube videos. I never imagined it would lead to this moment, standing in my school's main hallway, watching police sirens pull into the parking lot. Let me back up and explain how a handful of 20-minute lectures about the Civil War turned into the most terrifying experience of my life. It started when my juniors were face-planting on Reconstruction. Dates, amendments, who did what? Blank stares. I figured I'd throw together a bare-bones channel for them. Mr. Collins Explains History. That was it. My voice over slides. No face, no school name, nothing that would connect back to me except the nickname my students already used. I told them I'd post a few walkthroughs of the tougher units, then pull it down after finals. I'm not a YouTuber. I grade essays and remind kids to stop carving into desktops. It did okay. A couple hundred subscribers, mostly current and former students and a few parents. Comments were harmless. Thanks, this helped, or finally got the timeline. Then I got a wall of text from a user named Truthseeker1776. He said I was the only teacher speaking truth, and I needed to reach a wider audience. I said thanks and moved on. It read like the kind of enthusiastic rant you skim and forget. A week later, an email showed up at my school address from a David Henriksen, calling himself a longtime follower. He wanted to discuss important historical parallels. I replied, short and polite. Thanks for watching, but I can't correspond outside curriculum. He wrote again the next morning, and that night, and the next day. Long screeds about how the education system hides the truth, and how he and I see what others miss. It wasn't threatening, just intense. I told myself he was harmless and ignored it. That's where I messed up. I should have flagged it right there, but honestly, teachers get weird emails all the time. Concerned parents, overzealous hobbyists, the occasional, I found a typo in slide 6. When I stopped answering, his tone shifted. He started addressing me as brother in spirit. He said we needed to meet to change the world together. Some days there were 5 messages before lunch. I blocked his address. 3 days later, a package showed up at the front office with my name on it. Secretary hands it to me like it's a stack of worksheets. I opened it in the copy room and felt my stomach drop. Inside, 3 self-published alternative history books, each crammed with sticky notes, plus a 15-page handwritten letter. He said I'd awakened his consciousness. He wrote about an obligation to act together, as if we'd already agreed to something. He referenced lines from my videos like they were coded messages. I didn't finish the letter. I shoved it back in the box and walked straight to the principal. My principal read the first page, sighed, and said, "You should file a police report." He wasn't dismissive. He knows the climate we work in. But he also knows I'm a history teacher, not a public figure. I told him I'd handle it. I told myself he was just a fan whose fixation would burn out if I stopped feeding it. That afternoon, I deleted the entire channel. No archive, no goodbye video. Gone. Class was quiet the next day. A couple students asked where the videos went. I said we were switching to worksheets. I wanted the whole thing erased from memory. For 4 days, nothing. Then he found my personal Facebook. The one with my wife and 2 kids, soccer photos, my real last name, all the normal stuff I kept separate from school. "I understand why you're going silent," he wrote. "The system is threatening your family." He said he would protect us if I kept my promise. We had no promises. I never promised anything. I'd made videos about the 13th Amendment. I don't accept random messages, so he'd gone through the message request funnel. That's how I saw it without him knowing I'd read it. I showed my wife. She stared at the screen and said, "How did he get this?" I didn't have an answer. Looking back, it wasn't magic. Cross-referencing comments, school board minutes, Zillow photos, people do that. But in the moment, it felt like a door in our house had been left open, and I couldn't remember unlocking it. I spent that night toggling privacy toggles like I was defusing a bomb. I scrubbed tags, unfriended old colleagues I barely knew, nuked old posts. I printed the letter from the package and put it in my briefcase. The next morning, I met with admin and told them everything. "He says the system is threatening my family," I said. "He thinks I'm hiding." The principal tightened his jaw. "We'll tighten visitor screening," he said. "We'll put your classroom on the do not visit list without an appointment." I nodded. "And I'll call the SRO," he added. "We'll get a case number." I walked back to my room, closed my door, and stared at the little rectangular window that looks into the hallway. Then I opened my laptop and started changing every password I owned. I immediately locked down all my social media and asked the school administration to tighten visitor screening. My wife insisted I call the police, and the officer I reached sounded calm, like he'd had the same conversation 10 times already that week. He said, "Without direct threats, there isn't much we can do beyond documenting it. Save everything. If he shows up or escalates, call 911 immediately." I wrote down a case number, emailed the screenshots and the letter, and tried to go back to teaching like that solved anything. We made a plan at home. Kids were to go straight to the car after practice. No lingering, no answering unknown numbers. I told the front office to route any package for me to admin first. It felt like a lot for what might be nothing, but telling myself that didn't change how often I checked the parking lot from my classroom window. 3 weeks went by. Quiet, almost boring. I told myself he'd moved on. Then, mid-morning on a Thursday, the classroom phone rang. The secretary said, tight voice, "Some man is demanding to see you, says it's urgent." I told my student teacher to keep the kids on task and walked down the hall. In the office lobby, I saw him, a mid-40s guy in a camouflage jacket, backpack slung, smiling like we'd planned a reunion. "Mr. Collins." "Finally," he said, stepping forward with his hand out. "I'm David. We've discussed so much over email." Marcus, our security guard, was already moving, slow and steady, planting himself between us. My mouth went dry. I said, "I didn't invite you here, David. You need to leave." He blinked like I'd misread my own lines. The smile slid off. He started talking fast, overlapping himself, saying he'd driven from Oregon to pull you out of the system, that we need to act now before it's too late. Marcus kept his hands low, but firm. "Sir, we need to step outside," he said. David shifted, grabbed his backpack strap like it was a lifeline, and raised his voice so everyone in the lobby could hear. He shouted that I'd betrayed the cause, that if I wasn't ready to speak truth, he'd do it for me. Marcus reacted before I even processed the words. He moved in, hooked David's arm, twisted both hands behind his back, and pushed him into the wall beside the display case. The backpack thumped to the floor. The secretary was already dialing 911, reading the script we'd practiced at safety training. Adult male, unauthorized visitor, agitated, security has him restrained. David kept yelling, calling out my name, telling me I was scared, that they had gotten to me, listing dates and lines from my videos like he was building a case in front of an invisible jury. I didn't say anything. I took one step back and another, because I didn't want to be in grabbing distance if he slipped free. The police came fast. 2 officers, then a third. They took over from Marcus, cuffed David, and asked about weapons. One officer picked up the backpack, set it on the counter, and started pulling things out. Printouts of all my deleted videos, corners highlighted and annotated, detailed maps of the streets around the school, photos of my house and my car, angles you only get by standing there, a folding knife, a cheap orange megaphone. One of the officers held up the megaphone and looked at me. I didn't say anything. I just kept my hands flat on the counter so I wouldn't shake. They walked him out while he shouted that I'd see, that the students deserve the truth. And then the door closed, and it was just the fluorescent buzz and Marcus telling me to breathe. At the station, a detective sat with me and explained the charges: trespassing on school property, weapons possession in a school zone, stalking. He said, "We searched his car. There's more." He listed off a stack of papers with my name, my home address, and my wife's work schedule. There were notes about when my porch light turned on most nights. He'd been in town before today. That sat in my chest like a weight I couldn't lift. They served him an emergency restraining order. Later, a judge made it longer. He pled out and got probation with conditions: no contact, no weapons, mandated counseling, periodic checks. It wasn't a movie ending. It was paperwork and schedules, and me sitting in my car before driving home, staring at my steering wheel while the bell for last period rang somewhere behind me. I changed everything after that. I don't run public channels anymore. If I make a video, it sits on a closed school server behind a login only my students have. My social media is locked to verified friends and colleagues, and I don't post family photos anywhere that isn't private, and even then, I think twice. The kids roll their eyes when I make them submit questions through the LMS instead of email, but I'd rather be annoying than tracked. I tell my classes that the internet remembers more than you want it to, and I don't joke about it. No more trying to reach beyond my classroom walls. One 20-minute video about the Civil War was enough for someone to decide we were brothers in spirit who needed to change the world together, and that's not a risk I'll ever take again. Four years ago, I worked night shift as an operator at a small gas station on the outskirts of Boise. It was one of those places stuck between town and nothing. Quiet road, no neighbors close, and after midnight I could go 20 minutes without headlights. I sat in a little booth with bulletproof glass, ran cards, flipped pumps on, and slid gum or cigarettes through the drawer. My shift was 11 to 7. I killed time with a paperback or a show on my laptop with the volume low so I could still hear the lot. End of October, a Tuesday, a little after 1 a.m., a woman walked up on foot from the dark shoulder. Maybe 25. Jeans, dark jacket, red hair pulled tight. She asked for a bag of chips from the vending machine inside. I told her I couldn't unlock the store area. I could sell her whatever I had at the window. She nodded like that was fine, bought a soda, and walked off the way she came. I figured she lived somewhere along the road and cut through on foot. People did weird shortcuts out there. 3 nights later, Friday, around 2, same woman. She walked up with this calm little smile and said, "Hi, David." I froze. My badge only said, "Attendant." I'd never told her my name. I asked how she knew me. She tilted her head like I was joking and said, "You told me." I knew I hadn't. I asked what she needed. She just looked at me for a long 30 count, like she was checking a list in her head, then said, "Just wanted to see you," and left. Her walk bugged me. Too slow, like she wanted to stretch it out. Saturday I expected her, but nothing. Sunday, around 3, she was back. Came right up to the glass and didn't say a word. Just stared. I asked if I could help her. Nothing. I tried again. Still quiet. Not even a blink. I kept my tone flat and calm because people escalate off tone. She didn't. I looked down at the panic button under the counter, not pressing it, just acknowledging it was there. I said, "If you need a tow or a phone, I can call somebody." She didn't answer. That's when she raised her hand and laid her palm flat on the glass between us. Then she dragged her fingers down slowly, nails squeaking. It wasn't loud through the glass, but it was enough to crawl into my head. The air felt wrong. I said, "If you don't need anything, you have to leave the property." I put a little authority in it because that usually makes people decide. She finally spoke. "It's your birthday today, isn't it?" I didn't hide it well. I'm not a great liar, and she nailed it. 30 that day. I hadn't told anyone at work. My manager didn't care about birthdays, and I wasn't close with the day shift guy. I said, "Ma'am, I'm asking you to leave." I picked up my phone to start dialing. I wasn't sure if I'd call the non-emergency line or just go straight to 911, but I needed a uniformed presence at minimum. Headlights rolled into the lot hard and high. Diesel rumble I recognized before I even saw the grill. A long-haul guy, Doug, who fueled there a lot. Good guy. Didn't talk much, but nodded every time. He pulled up to pump 4. I pressed the intercom and said, "Doug, hang on a second. Don't leave. I might need a hand." He looked at the booth, then over at the woman, then back at me. He thumbed up and started fueling. I watched the gallon numbers flip while I kept my eyes on her. She stepped sideways and stood just in the edge of the light, like she wanted to be there but not be seen all the way. I kept the intercom open and said, "Doug, I've got a trespasser. Just stick around until I figure out if I need to call it in." He said, "Copy," like it was a CB. I told the woman, "You can wait off the property if you're waiting for someone, but you can't loiter at the window." She said, almost conversational, "You live off Appleton, right?" It hit cold. That was the right street. I hadn't given her anything to work with. No mail in the booth, no ID visible. I said, "Leave." She smiled without teeth. Not flirty, just sure of herself. I moved my hand from the panic button to the phone again. The lot felt small suddenly, like the lights didn't reach the corners. Doug clicked his handle off and set it back. He wiped his hands on a rag and climbed down out of the cab. I hit the intercom. "Doug, please wait by the window." He nodded and walked over. The woman stepped back into the dark stripe between 2 light poles. I said to Doug, "She's been coming by, knows my name and address. I'm calling this in." He said, "Yeah." "Stay behind the glass," I started dialing. The woman watched him, head a little to the side like she was deciding something. He glanced at her and then at me. He said, "Low, you got cameras?" I said yes. He said, "Good." I got the dispatcher, gave the address, said I had a female trespassing, possibly stalking, new personal details, refusing to leave. They asked her description. I gave jeans, dark jacket, red hair in a ponytail, mid-20s, on foot. They asked if I felt in immediate danger. I said, I don't know yet. She's not leaving. While I spoke, Doug stayed square to the woman, hands visible, no sudden moves. He wasn't a hero about it. He was doing what any decent person does when something feels off. I appreciated that more than I can say. The dispatcher said units were en route. I told Doug, they're on the way. He nodded and stepped out from under the canopy to get a better look at where she'd gone. The woman took that moment like it was her cue. From the dark stripe, she peeled away from the wall and started slowly walking closer. In the light from the station, I saw she was holding something metal in her hand. Looked like a knife. It caught a slice of the canopy light when she shifted her wrist. Doug saw it too. He stepped forward, squared himself, and said loud, steady, "Ma'am, what's the problem tonight?" No aggression, just volume. She stopped, looked at him, then at me through the glass, like she was weighing something. For a second I thought she'd talk. Instead, she turned hard and bolted into the dark like she knew exactly where to go. I lost her beyond Pump 6 where the cameras don't reach as far. Blind spot I'd already told the owner about. Doug moved a few steps after her, then stopped and came back. "Don't chase," I said into the intercom. "Yeah," he said. "Not my job." He stayed with me while I called it in again and told the dispatcher she had a knife this time. I added that she'd known my name and address, and I had footage. I kept my voice even because dispatchers match your calm, and I needed clear notes on the report. They said units were on the way. Those minutes stretched. Doug stood in view of the booth window, hands out of his pockets, eyes on the lot. We didn't talk much. He asked one thing. "You want me to move the rig to block that side?" I said yes, and he eased it across the far lane, not blocking exits, just forcing any approach to come from the front where the cameras and lights were better. It made me feel like I was at least doing something. 15 minutes later, the first cruiser rolled in. Then another. They swept the area with handhelds, checked the ditch and the scrub behind the dumpsters, even walked the shoulder in both directions with their flashlights moving slow. Nothing. One of them asked me to play the footage back. We watched her walk in, the knife glint, then the sprint out. No plate, no car, no face clear enough for software. I gave a statement, signed where they pointed, and they took stills off the video on a body cam. They said they'd patrol the zone on overnights for a while, and told me to call immediately if she returned. That was the phrase, immediately if she returns. Doug waited until they finished and asked if I was good. I said yes, which was true in the basic sense that I was breathing and still at my post. He said, "Be careful," and headed out. I finished the shift because leaving would have meant locking the pumps, and that causes complaints, and also because I didn't want to walk to my car while the adrenaline was still banging around. The morning guy came at 7, and I told him the basics without the parts about my address. He shrugged like he didn't know what to say. I went home, locked my door, and sat in a chair for an hour doing nothing because every sound felt like a step on gravel. I took 2 weeks off using vacation time I'd been saving for Christmas. My manager tried to talk me into 1 week. Staffing was thin, but I said no, and he signed it because the police report made him nervous. When I came back, everything looked the same, but it didn't feel the same. I checked the cameras more. I parked closer to the door. I kept the phone unlocked on the non-emergency number and the panic button uncovered. She never showed up again. That should have made it better, but it didn't. I still don't know how she knew my name or that it was my birthday. Every time I hear footsteps outside the booth at night, I stop breathing for a second. Then I make myself exhale and ask if they need fuel. I asked everyone at work if maybe they'd mentioned my name or birthday to someone, but nobody had. The owner checked the counter area and the booth for anything with my info visible. Nothing faced the public, and the schedule with birthdays was in the back office. My name badge didn't come in until a week after all this. So how did she know? Did she see me at the mailbox one night and follow me, learn my routine, note the street? Did she go through my trash for a bill with my name and connect it to the station hours from the receipt times? The way she came only in those dead early hours, it felt planned, like she was testing how fast I'd call or if I'd step out. The knife, was it always part of her plan? Or did she bring it because I kept saying no and staying behind the glass? The police kept the report on file, but said without a name or a face, they couldn't do much beyond drive-bys. I still wonder if she shifted to someone else. Same pattern, showing up where they can't leave, knowing details she shouldn't know, coming back until the night she stops running. So 3 years ago, I was working as an accountant at this small firm in Austin. There were only 5 of us in the office on the first floor of this house that the owner converted into workspace. One of my co-workers was this guy Marcus, tall, skinny, maybe 25, always wearing headphones. He worked on the client database and barely talked to anyone. I tried chatting with him a couple times in the break room, but he'd just give one-word answers without looking up from his phone. One Wednesday, I stayed late working on a quarterly report until 8 p.m. Marcus left at his normal time at 6. I finished up, locked the office, and biked home. I was renting an apartment 2 miles from work. I remember thinking the ride felt good after staring at spreadsheets. I wasn't scared of the route. It was well lit, familiar. Still, at a red light, I had this stupid moment where I felt watched, like someone was just over my shoulder. I chalked it up to the dark and being tired and kept going. Got home around 8:30, took a shower, ate dinner, and settled in to watch a show. Around 11 p.m., I heard footsteps in the hallway outside my door. Someone was walking back and forth very slowly. I lived on the 3rd floor of this old building with only 6 apartments total. The footsteps continued for maybe 10 minutes. I turned the TV down and listened. Back and forth. Slow. Stop. Start again. I went to the door and looked through the peephole. Marcus was standing in the hallway. He was staring right at my door, motionless, hands in his hoodie pockets. I froze. We'd never exchanged any personal information. I definitely never told him my address. I tried to convince myself it was a coincidence. Maybe he was visiting someone. But he didn't knock on any other door. He didn't move at all, just stared at mine. I whispered his name once, just to see if he'd react. He didn't. My throat felt dry. I backed away from the door and grabbed my phone. I typed out a message to my friend, then deleted it because what was I even going to say? Coworker outside my door doing nothing? It sounded paranoid and also embarrassing for work. I stood there, phone in my hand, waiting. He stood there for another 5 minutes, then turned around and walked to the stairs. I kept watching through the peephole until I couldn't hear his steps anymore. I waited another 10 minutes and checked again. Empty hallway. I double-checked the deadbolt. I turned the TV off because it made me feel exposed. I didn't sleep all night. Every time the building creaked, I was sure he was back. Next day at work, I waited until we were alone in the break room. I wasn't going to make a scene with everyone there, but I wasn't going to act like nothing happened either. I asked him straight up why he came to my apartment last night. "What?" he said, pulling one ear cup off. His face was completely calm. "You were outside my door," I said. "I saw you." He blinked once. "You're mistaken. I was home all evening. I can show you my phone's location history to prove it." I said I saw him with my own eyes through the peephole. He shrugged and said I must have had a rough day and confused him with a neighbor. He put his headphone back on. That was it. No curiosity, no apology, nothing. I stood there feeling stupid and angry at the same time. At my desk, I kept thinking through every possible explanation that wasn't, "He followed me home." Did he know someone in my building? Did he just happen to be there, staring at the wrong door for 15 minutes? None of it fit. I didn't like that I was the only one who could confirm it. So after lunch, I went to the owner and asked her to check the security camera footage at the office entrance. It covered part of the sidewalk out front. She didn't brush me off. She asked if I was okay. I said I was. I just wanted to verify something. We pulled up the recording and scrubbed to last night. At 6:03 p.m. he left like usual. Nothing weird. Later we found 8:47 p.m. On the recording you could see Marcus leave the office, stop at his car but not get in. He stands there for a minute, then starts walking on foot in the direction of my apartment. We paused the video. She looked at me worried. "Do you want me to call someone?" she asked. I said not yet. I needed facts. I zoomed in on the timestamp and wrote it down. She asked where I lived. I showed her my apartment address on a map. It would take about 40 minutes to walk there. Friday. Marcus wasn't at work. Nobody said anything. Just his empty chair and the headphones coiled on the desk like he'd be right back. Monday, the owner called a quick meeting and said he'd emailed a resignation with no explanation. Asked to have his paperwork and final check mailed to him. No forwarding number, no goodbye. I never saw him again. That should have felt like relief, but it made me unsteady. It felt like the problem slipped out of view, not gone, just off camera. I sat at my desk and stared at the login screen he used and wondered if his password was still in the system. IT removed it by lunch. I tried to find him online. I Googled his name with the city, checked LinkedIn and Facebook, even that old photo site he mentioned once. Nothing current. Just profiles with the same name in other states, wrong faces, dead accounts. It felt like he stepped off the sidewalk and kept walking until the internet ran out. I even checked county records for a bit before I realized I had no idea what I was hoping to see there. I closed the tabs and told myself I'd stop looking. I didn't, not right away. The owner filed a report with the police. I went with her because I wanted the officer to hear it from me. He took notes and asked if Marcus threatened me, tried my door, followed me more than once, or sent messages. The answer was no to all of it, which is exactly why this kind of thing is hard to report. He said they documented and told us to call if Marcus showed up at the office or at my building. He wasn't rude, just practical. Leaving there, I felt worse, like I asked for a seatbelt and got a brochure about cars. The owner squeezed my shoulder in the parking lot and said, "We'll take precautions." I believed her. I still checked behind me walking back in. She changed every lock that week and hired a company to install better cameras at the front door, the rear alley, and the lobby. She gave me a new key card and told me to text her when I arrived and when I left for a while. She offered to shift my hours so I wouldn't be there late. I took her up on it, not because I was scared of the office, but because my stomach dropped when the sun went down and I pictured my hallway. It wasn't about courage. It was about removing chances. A month later, I moved to a new apartment across town. I used a P.O. box for a bit and asked work to keep everything digital. Only my closest friend helped me move, and I asked her not to tag anything. I didn't tell anyone at the office the new address. Not because I thought someone else there would do something. They were good people. But because I needed space between my life and work. I changed my commute and switched grocery stores for a while. Maybe that sounds paranoid. It felt like basic hygiene. I bought a different doormat than I'd planned because the one I liked had my initial on it. I don't do initials anymore. For weeks after the move, the habit stuck. I checked the peephole at random at night. Sometimes I'd wake up at 3, cross the room, and look out without turning on lights. Blank hallway every time. I told myself I'd stop after a month. I didn't. It faded on its own. At work, people stopped mentioning Marcus. A new hire took his desk. The headphones disappeared. Every so often, the owner asked if I was doing okay, and I said yes, and she left it there. It helped that nobody tried to make it a story. The thing that creeps me out most is, I have no idea how he found my address. I never put it in any work documents, never mentioned my neighborhood, never posted it online. Maybe he followed me home one day and I didn't notice, or he went through files when no one was looking. I keep replaying him just standing there, not knocking, not moving. Why stand there that long? What was he planning to do if I opened the door? Sometimes I think about someone else's hallway, someone who works 2 desks over from a guy like that, and I wonder if he's out there now, picking a door and waiting. The police said they'd keep the report on file, but I doubt they ever followed up. I'm just glad that footage existed, because if it didn't, I don't think anyone would have believed me. I never thought checking someone's ID could get someone killed. 5 years ago, I worked night security at a mall on the outskirts of Portland. My shift started at 10 p.m. when the stores closed and ended at 6 a.m. It was simple stuff. Walk the floors, rattle the gates, tell the last stragglers that no, they couldn't cut through the food court at midnight. My partner Kelsey ran cameras from the security office. She was efficient in this deadpan way and liked to chirp on the radio when she caught me yawning. That Friday, around 1 a.m., I swung past the North Service entrance and saw a guy hunched by the crash bar, working it with something thin and shiny. I lit him up with the flashlight and said, "Hey." Step away from the door. He turned slow, not flinching. 35-ish, athletic, shaved head. Scorpion tattoo inked on the left side of his neck, not a tremor in his hands. He didn't bolt. He just straightened, like he'd been expecting me, and stared hard, taking my measure the way guys do when they're deciding if they can get away with something. I've walked off plenty of drunk teens and angry ex-employees. This wasn't that. The stillness put me on edge. I kept the light on his chest and told him we were closed and he needed to leave. "Or I call it in," I said, thumb tapping the radio. He held my stare and smiled a little. "You're making a mistake," he said. Calm voice, friendly even, like we were co-workers and I'd parked in his spot. The way he said it crawled under my skin. "You can leave through the lot," I told him. "Now." He nodded like he'd decided to humor me, turned, and walked out slow toward the exit lane. Not fast, not nervous. He put his hands in his pockets like he had all night. I radioed Kelsey. "Possible B&E, North Service. Male, shaved head, neck tattoo. Departed toward the lot," I said. She logged it and asked if I wanted a patrol car. I said negative. He was off property and I'd do an extra loop. She told me she'd keep an eye on the perimeter cams. Then it was back to normal. I checked the loading docks, the padlocks, and did the sweep through the basement level. Storage rooms, mechanical, all the forgotten corners of a place that looks clean only because the mess is kept below people's feet. Around 3 a.m., I was on my last pass downstairs. Kelsey should have been seeing me on 3 cameras down there. Later, we learned they'd dropped it once, no picture, just static. Could have been equipment failing, old mall, old wiring, or someone who knew what they were doing. I didn't know that then. I was walking the back corridor, counting the closed doors, when I heard this quiet rasping from behind an older storage door we rarely touched. Not a bang, like someone breathing through their mouth. I stopped, held my breath, listened. It went dead still. I waited 10 seconds, maybe 15, heard nothing else. I told myself it was the ventilation switching, or a loose sweep against concrete. I tried the handle. It was locked. No fresh pry marks. If I had a bad feeling, it was small enough to ignore. You don't call a full sweep on every weird noise when you're alone on a floor that hums and clicks all night. I radioed my all clear and headed up the stairwell. Kelsey said, "Copy. Basement clear. Coffee when you're back." And I said I'd take it black. At 5 a.m., Kelsey wrapped early. Her kid's school pickup on short Fridays meant she'd clock out an hour before me. Standard. I walked her to her car like always. The lot was empty except for a cleaning contractor's van and a couple of early deliveries lined up against the far curb. She waved off my "text me when you're home" with a "you worry too much." Her commute cut through the industrial district where the roads are wide and dead at that hour. We said goodnight under the sodium lamps, and she drove out toward the highway ramp. I went back in, finished the incident report on the 1 a.m. encounter, flagged the north entrance for maintenance to check the lock, and watched morning creep into the camera feeds. At 6:15, I locked up our office and headed for my car, already making a grocery list in my head because I had a rare Saturday off and wouldn't be back until Monday. It felt like a clean, uneventful shift except for the tattoo guy and that one noise I'd already half forgotten. Saturday evening, my manager called. I remember the way her voice flattened. "I need you to sit down," she said, and told me they'd found Kelsey in her car in an abandoned lot out by the warehouses. No crash, no robbery. She'd been strangled. The detectives wanted to talk to me. I said, "I know who you need to look at," before she finished the sentence. At the station, I told them about the man with the scorpion tattoo and how he didn't run, didn't blink. I told them about the dead cameras in the basement and the breath behind that door. They pulled the footage. He was there. Glimpses, angles, nothing straight on. They grabbed frames of his tattoo, his gait, the way he kept his hands low like he'd done this before. They ran it through their system and came up empty. Detectives hate empty. They searched the lot where she was found and canvassed the ramp exits between us and that district. They told me to think hard, any detail, any word he'd said beyond what I'd quoted. I had nothing useful, just the 3 words that kept looping in my head like an accusation I couldn't erase. They never caught whoever killed her. I stayed at that mall for 6 more months because quitting right then felt like running. The shifts didn't change much on paper, but it wasn't routine anymore. I checked every latch twice and logged little stuff. Maintenance swapped the North Service hardware, and a vendor rewired the dead feeds and called it age. I staggered my basement sweeps so they never landed at the same minute 2 nights in a row. Kelsey's chair stayed empty. Nobody moved her mug. Every night I passed the north entrance and pictured that tattoo turning away again. The detective called every couple of weeks at first, then less. He kept asking whether the man with the scorpion said anything else. I told him no, just, "You're making a mistake," like it was a rule. I kept bringing up the breathy sound behind that storage door and how 3 cameras died. Maybe he slipped in during the outage and waited for shift change. Maybe he learned our patterns and picked a route. The detective said there was no evidence tying that to Kelsey's murder. No prints, no pry marks, no fibers. I said it wasn't random. I tried to be practical, not paranoid. I added escorts for anyone leaving early, even vendors. I walked people out in pairs. I kept a small notebook with times and names, not because policy said to, but so a record existed. Still, harmless things set me off. An unlocked mop closet, a crate nudged from the wall, footsteps when I knew I was alone. Once I opened that storage room with a manager to shut myself up. Empty, dust and old signage. I marked the hinge with a dot of tape so I'd know if it moved. It never did. Around month 5, I told my manager I couldn't do nights there much longer. She offered a transfer to another property. I said I needed more distance than that. We held a safety meeting and showed slides about situational awareness, which felt like telling people to breathe. The guy with the tattoo never came back while I was on duty. Maybe he changed malls. Maybe he changed cities. Maybe he drove by and decided it wasn't worth it. Thinking like that burns you out. I started waking up tired. I printed a resume and left it on the seat. I quit security without drama. I finished a shift, sent a 2-week notice, and meant it. The manager asked if days would help. It wouldn't. I took a retail job with normal hours instead of locking down an empty building before dawn. My sleep got better in pieces. I stopped checking the closet twice, but I still drive past the mall sometimes and glimpse the North Service entrance. I think about Kelsey every time. She was 23, just out of college, proud of doing it on her own. The case stayed open on paper, but the updates stopped. Every couple of months I search online for arrests that mention a scorpion neck tattoo or an industrial lot homicide, and nothing comes up. 5 years later, I still remember his face and that steady voice. I wrote down everything I could and handed it over, and it wasn't enough. I don't know if he practiced that calm on other people before us or after. I think about the storage door and the dead cameras and how routine it looked. I wonder how many people saw him and didn't realize it until it was too late. I still hear him say it sometimes, and I still hear myself let him walk away. The photo showed up on his phone faster than I understood what was happening. I was on my knees next to the counter, holding the empty cash box, looking confused and scared. He took 3 shots from different angles before I even processed that he was documenting this. That was 9 years ago, and I still check my name online sometimes, expecting to see those images. But let me back up to how it started. I was 15 and working weekends at a coffee place in a strip mall on the edge of town. Small place, regulars who ordered the same thing every Saturday, kids from the theater with too much perfume, the guy who always asked for extra hot, like it made him tough. Most stores closed by 8, but we stayed open until 9 for the movie theater crowd. That Saturday, my manager left 20 minutes early like she sometimes did, telling me to finish the closing tasks and lock up. She'd done it before. I didn't mind. It made me feel like I wasn't just a kid. I was counting the register when the front door opened. A man in his 40s walked in wearing a dark jacket, and I could see his thick beard and the way his eyes kept darting around the empty shop. The bell chimed, and I looked up with the automatic, "Hey, we're closed for the night," already halfway out of my mouth. He didn't leave. He walked straight up to the counter and pulled out his phone, holding it in one hand while the other stayed in his jacket pocket. It was the posture that made me nervous first, like he'd practiced it. He started talking about money I owed him. He said it too casually at first, like we'd been mid-argument already and I'd just caught up. "You know what this is about." "Don't make me repeat it," he said. I asked what he meant, because obviously I didn't owe anyone anything, let alone a stranger in a strip mall coffee shop. He stopped pretending to be calm and told me to open the register. There was a bulge under his jacket that looked like it could be a gun. I don't know guns. It could have been anything. But he angled his pocket just enough. I wasn't going to test him. I kept my voice steady and said, "I'll open it." My hands shook anyway. The till popped and I cleared the drawer with quick, clumsy motions, the way you do when you're trying not to look like you're rushing. He watched my face more than my hands. I pulled out all the bills, maybe $200, and set them on the counter. He nodded once, very slightly, like a teacher making a mental note. He grabbed the money, but instead of leaving, he told me to get on my knees beside the counter. I froze. He said it again and added, "Beside the register." Hold the box. I didn't understand why until he said to hold the empty cash box up like I'd just stolen from it. My stomach slid, but my head kept working. He wasn't acting drunk or high. This was planned. That's when he raised his phone, and I saw the camera app open. He took the first photo, and I just stayed there, my face showing exactly how confused and scared I was. He moved slightly and took another shot, then a third from a different angle. He didn't tell me to smile or cry or anything. He didn't need to. The whole thing took maybe 15 seconds. The only thing I said was, "Please don't," which sounded pathetic the second it left my mouth. He didn't answer. Then he said if I told anyone about the money, these photos would go online and everyone would think I robbed my own store. He said, "They'll fire you, and it'll follow you," in this flat voice like he was reciting a fact. He said it twice, staring right at me, making sure I understood. I did. My brain threw up stupid what-ifs. What if the manager looked at the camera and saw me kneeling with the box? What if he sent it to my mom? What if my school saw it? He slid the phone into his pocket, still keeping his other hand near that bulge like punctuation. I stayed exactly where I was because that felt like the safest thing to do. He glanced toward the lobby, then at the hall that led to the back. He told me, "Count to 50. Then lock up." He didn't say don't scream. He didn't need to. We both knew nobody was coming through that door at 8:45 unless they wanted decaf. He stepped back, looked at me one last time. Not dramatic, just verifying the picture in front of him. Then he turned and walked out through the employee exit that led to the back parking lot. I stood there in the empty shop, not able to move for a few minutes. The air felt stuck. My hands were still in that dumb position like I was holding the box even though I'd set it down. I kept hearing the door chime in my head, even though it was quiet. When my manager came back to grab something she'd forgotten, she saw the open register right away. She paused in the doorway with her keys still in her hand and said, "Why is the till open?" I swallowed and said I'd miscounted and the money was all there. I tried to sound bored like I just made a normal end-of-night mistake. She walked over, glanced at the drawer, didn't touch anything, and said, "Lock it up. I'll double-check tomorrow." That was it. She believed me, or at least didn't push it. I think she was annoyed with herself for leaving early more than anything. My dad picked me up that night and I didn't say anything on the drive home. He asked if I wanted food and I said no. He asked if the manager stayed, and I said she'd left early like usual, which was true and felt like a loophole. I stared at the glove box and counted streetlights, then stopped because counting made me think of the count to 50 thing. When we got home, I said I had homework and went to my room. I locked my door, sat on the floor, and tried to figure out what to do. I put my phone face down like that would stop anything. The idea of calling the police scared me less than the idea of those photos getting out. That's what kept looping. My classmates, my teachers, my parents, everyone seeing me on my knees holding an empty cash box. It wouldn't matter if I explained. It would look like I staged it. I kept imagining the comments under it, the group chats, someone printing it out as a joke. I know that sounds shallow compared to a crime, but I was 15 and I knew how kids are. I drafted a text to my manager 3 times and deleted it. I thought about calling her and saying the register looked short because I miscounted, but then she'd ask how much, and I didn't know the exact amount. I thought about saying someone had come in after hours and scared me, but then the cameras would show me kneeling with the box, or maybe he'd already uploaded it somewhere I couldn't see, or he'd send it if I said anything. I kept replaying the way he said it. "They'll fire you. It'll follow you." It sounded like he'd done this before and knew exactly how it played. The next day, my manager found the shortage when she did the real count and called a meeting. She texted me to come in early. My stomach flipped so hard I had to sit down in the kitchen. At the shop, she stood with the printed closeout and said, "We're missing cash from last night." I kept my face blank and said I definitely gave her the full amount. I said I must have put a stack in the wrong slot and maybe it slipped under the tray. We pulled the drawer and checked. Nothing. She looked at me strange but didn't accuse me directly. She asked if anyone came in after she left. I said just a customer who wanted directions and left right away. I heard myself say it and felt sick. She nodded, slow, like she was filing it away for later, and told me to be more careful because corporate would look at it. I said okay, and spent the rest of the shift moving like a robot. After, I wiped the same counter 3 times, just to have something to do. A week later, they let me go for being careless with money. The district manager was there and the conversation was stiff. She said it wasn't personal, but the shortage mattered. I signed the termination form with a hand that wouldn't stop shaking and handed over my key. My parents thought I just wasn't cut out for the job. I told them it stressed me out, and I wanted to focus on school. I never told them what actually happened. I'm 24 now, and those photos never appeared anywhere I could find. But every time I get a notification from an unknown number, or see a message request from someone I don't know, my stomach drops. I still check my name online sometimes and brace for it. I never saw that man again. Not around the mall or anywhere else in town. Sometimes I think about how staying quiet only protected him and not me. Back then, I thought silence would keep me safe. It didn't. It just kept me stuck. The fear made me choose wrong. But it's too late to change that now. And I have to live with knowing I let him get away with it because I was too scared of what people would think.